Greetings, Guardians, my name's Bife here. So, by the length of the video, I think you can imagine that something happened. This is going to be a first look-through of the first mission of the Edge of Fate campaign that I did with Mr. Roffle Waffles. Now, normally I would not do this, but we are a month out, and the preview for this mission is already out there. So, I'm going to go ahead and give you this warning now before we roll any of the footage or get into any of it. This is a major spoiler alert, obviously. If you want to go ahead and keep away from all of this, do not sweat, do not fret. I will make sure that if ever it is mentioned again in my content, I give you a heavy disclaimer, and as a momentary disclaimer here, if you don't want to see any of this, you should step away right now. With all of that being said, there are a few other things I should mention. First of all, the embargo for cutscenes was something that was separately dropped just a little bit later. At the time of recording, Milo and I were under the impression that we couldn't show the cutscenes because of embargoes. I mean, the video we already recorded is 2.5 hours long. I'm not necessarily going to jump in on that just yet, but if I can grab someone else's footage and do a separate video of that, I think I will see about it if it's worth it. For the time being, just accept that the cutscenes we can show are the cutscenes we can show, and that we were doing our best in the moment with the information that we had. Secondly, I want all of you to go ahead and check the links down below in the description and send some serious love over to Milo. He was incredibly generous, sharing not only his footage here, but also his time. This was a great piece of content to make. It was just a ton of fun. We ended up yapping for 2.5 hours, giving our impressions and our thoughts and talking about everything that we were seeing, describing different bits and pieces. And you got to remember, this is Milo. He is relatively new to Destiny. So yeah, it was just really cool to get Milo's perspective on all this as well. And again, send some love over to him. It wouldn't have been possible to make this content if he hadn't just spontaneously offered to allow me to use the footage. So that's really, really generous of him. Also, we will be making a piece of content over on his channel where we'll be breaking down an interview that he had with a member of Bungie's narrative team, and I'm very excited to do that. When that's up, I will leave the link to that down below in the comments section as well. In the meantime, thanks again to Milo, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy this very long, very yap-filled breakdown of the first mission and talking about all of the lore and all of the things that we learn. Very excited to share this with you. Without much further ado, let's begin. Milo, first of all, thank you so much for, well, letting me use your footage and allowing this time to just take a look through the first story mission of Edge of Fate. This has been incredibly generous of you, so big ups to everybody, whoever is not following Milo for his Destiny content. It is a breath of fresh air, so go ahead and check him out. But again, thanks, dude.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I think that there is no one who I could have picked who'd be better suited than you to help kind of usher us into whatever the hell the story is going to be in this next saga. So yeah, I think that it's my pleasure.
So really quickly, just to kind of go through what's going on, you had the video that you released earlier, which is just your full run through of the first mission of Edge of Fate. Now that spoiler disclaimers and everything like that are out of the way, we're going to play through that, but we're also going to take moments here or there to just yap and maybe pause as we talk through each bit and just talk about what is being said, what's important across each of the bits and pieces, what you found interesting and what you thought was a big mystery, and what I see within the gameplay, which is also very clearly like, oh, we need to talk about this. So yeah, I think we're probably going to go ahead and do that. And it starts here about with this conversation with Ikora, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and the thing to listen out for is that this is a new Ikora voice actor who you may or may not instantly recognize. Yeah, let's let it rip.
All right, here we go.
Welcome to Kepler, as the Vanguard Archive calls it. The gravimetric distortions we tracked from the EDZ are tangled in an excess of dark matter. In our records, this planetoid was confirmed to be unoccupied and inert. But these readings indicate a singularity. Something's keeping this planetoid stable and our matter intact, but... Guardian, there's a black hole here on Kepler. This is dangerous. If at any point this singularity destabilizes, it could swallow us and take the entire Sol system with it. We need to find whoever sent our invitation. They need our help.
Okay, so, right away, first of all, doesn't Kepler look really pretty there? Oh my goodness.
It does. But maybe more importantly,
yeah.
is that Is that Savathun?
That is oh my goodness. We're hearing Deborah twice, and that's going to be a little bit trippy.
Yeah, so I need to say one thing here that Bungie will want me to be clear about is we recognize her voice instantly. Like, I've actually hung out with Deborah Wilson in person, so it's even more so I know what her voice sounds like. But they were not in there being like, listen, Deborah Wilson is the new voice actor, da 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 da. Like, they were not using that as like a marketing point or anything like that. So technically it's unconfirmed, I guess. But I mean, we know it's Deborah. So yeah, she is the new Ikora voice actor, following the recasting that they've done for Ikora and also another character who I think the voice actor for Ikora also played. Is that Chioma? Have I got that right?
Ikora, Chioma, and then there was also some word about the voice actor for Orin, if I'm remembering the TWAB where they mentioned this.
Yeah, so basically some of those characters had a shared voice actor, and that's why there's been multiple recasts across those. I think Chioma was the one where Chioma is not someone who, as far as I understand it, is going to be super relevant suddenly in the Edge of Fate. It's just that they were mentioned in the TWAB because it's the same actor, and that's why they were being recast there. That was my understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. Getting on to some really big lore things, just like, don't get me wrong, voice acting stuff's very important, support the SAG-AFTRA strike, but it's very, very important to bring up the major lore call out here, which is to do with the Singularity. So
yep.
Some of the stuff here is very much deep cuts into the lore of the Nine, and a lot of it gets revealed to us in a lore book which is called Dust. The short version of it is basically that there are two factions among the Nine, right? There is a majority of 5 and a minority of 4. So the majority of 5 are the ones who sent Xur. They're the ones who are trying to actively help us. They're the ones who are actively assisting us. The minority of 4, however, they know that the existence of the Nine is tied to our existence, and they don't like that fact. They are actively trying to escape that reality. And the way they've been trying to do that is by creating a large enough mass of dark matter dust to create a singularity. So if you're tuned into the lore, immediately you can tell right off the bat that the minority of 4 is at work here within the bounds of Kepler, and they might be succeeding. It kind of depends on what's happened with the Nine and whether their factions have broken down and coalesced, which could be a thing that's gone on. It could be that the majority of 5 is still actively working kind of to help us. It could also be that the minority of 4 are the ones that we'll primarily be interacting with here, but regardless, this is already big red flags. And as Ikora points out in the very opening bit of the dialogue, it's very important to understand right here and right now that the Nine have actively been at work, and this is an immediate threat to the entire system. Like, if Sol gets swallowed by a black hole, I mean, there we all go. So, good work. We saved everything from the Witness, but like, you know, it's no good if we all get spaghettified.
The final suck is coming for us all in the end.
Suck.
I think it's also worth pointing out that at this point, and we'll sort of gradually learn more about this through the course of this mission, but at this point, we don't necessarily know what the other surrounding factions that may be present think of the Singularity, their sort of approach to it, and whether or not they're even considering there may be any Nine-y allegiance-y things happening in the background. And so, just as you often see with these sorts of things in sci-fi space magic media, you'll get people that will align with a cause because they'll assign their own meaning to it, or you'll get people that will push back against it. And that won't necessarily reflect what they think of the Nine's ambitions and goals. It might just be that they've got their own interpretation of what's going on, and they're just running with it. And so I think keep that thread in mind as the mission plays here, and we'll start to see some of those things manifest.
Oh, absolutely. It's very very appropriate for Destiny and for the way the Nine, and in particular, act. They don't really interact with people in the same way. They kind of see us all as tools. But yeah, let's keep playing this. Because if I'm not
Never
mistaken...
seen Elixni move like this. Mind their vertical, Guardian.
Yeah, so this is the new enemies, right? These are Corsairs.
Yes, so what's happened 3 seconds before this clip is that those Corsairs have flown overhead, Ikora warns us to watch our vertical, and we are then seeing them for the first time. One or two things to quickly call out. First of all, I apologize for not hitting a single crit just then. Very embarrassing. Second of all, this is one of the new exotics. It's called the Graviton Spike. It can switch between arc and stasis, so you'll see that happening a little bit just through the gameplay, just to call that out. Something I want to ask you, though. So these are new enemies, Fallen Corsairs. I have two questions about them. Number one, how have the Fallen not strapped themselves to jetpacks in the last 10 years of Destiny already? Like, how have they left that just by the wayside? Because you'd think the Fallen would really enjoy that sort of thing. Like, that seems to be in their in their nature. And then I've got a question about the Corsair verbiage specifically that I want to kind of get into. But yeah, like, have they not been flying up to this point ever? Is that really fully new?
No, I mean, like, it is entirely fully new, and you know, there's an extent to which stuff gets added because video game, but also yeah, I don't think I know of any mentions in the lore of any Corsairs with jetpacks or anything along those lines. The verbiage of Corsair, though, I think is very much worth calling out, though, because yeah, it harkens back to and, you know, this is a general thing that I think you can look at across all of the stuff to do with the Fallen, the Eliksni, is just the way that they were originally described within some of the early marketing for D1. And it's certainly the first way I saw them talked about was as spider pirates, right? Which you can tell everything about that from all the stuff that happens with, say, their movement, where if a Fallen is running away, they don't run. If they have all of their limbs, they scuttle, which, you know, little bits and pieces, cool animation stuff. But with a Corsair being another name, you know, this falls into that same kind of category of, yeah, it kind of reads with the entire identity of the faction. It doesn't necessarily always mean that we then have to tie the association of this is a band of pirates to all of them, because the Eliksni tend to be a wider group than that, just in the same way that Captain, for example, does not always have, like, sharp military connotations as it does have the connotations of just this is the head honcho, this is the leader. You know?
Right. Okay. Because something that I was curious about when I first saw that being the name that they were using is that I'm pretty sure in Maracena, and this is a sort of tangential cut, but it reroutes back to the original point, I promise. In Maracena, I'm pretty confident when there's discussion happening about what's taking place on Distributary, there's mention of Corsairs.
Yes.
And when I read it, I was like, wait, what? Like, but they're not Fallen. Like, but I didn't actually realize at the time that Corsair was like another word that was not just a Fallen related thing, but I think it is like a pirate ship. It's a pirate vessel, right? But then that made me think, hold on, why are there pirate vessels on Distributary? Like, what are they pirating? So that was why I was specifically wanting to call it out, because I was like, are there Corsairs everywhere in Destiny? Like, do they just whack that name on everything or what? But yeah, cool to see them being most appropriately described for the Fallen here.
So yeah, there is one last thing I will point out here, which is things like Season of the Plunder told us a lot about how the old Fallen warlords would take ketches around the system, which are the big ships that the Eliksni have. And they would literally just be grabbing everything that they could for plunder. And yeah, the idea of calling them pirates or corsairs or warlords back in those days absolutely makes sense. So again, another thing that really fits with the like entire faction of the Eliksni and the Fallen generally.
Hell yeah. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah, let's keep it rolling. Ooh, and this is the switch of the gun to the stasis and arc modes, isn't it?
Yes.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Lodi transmitting. Strange matter detected. Singularity opening near local HI and NHI population.
I can't tell when this mayday was sent. Whoever made it understands the danger this place is in. But this signal's too weak to have reached us on Earth. This isn't our invitation.
Okay, so I've got to ask. First of all, like, yes, we just get our first note about Lodi there, and clearly he's transmitting in the blind. It seems that he is in distress just based on the fact that he's saying Mayday. Do you have an idea what HI and NHI in that context means? Because I spoiler alert, I looked through this footage before we started this recording. At first, I thought that this was hostile indigenous and non-hostile indigenous population. But I don't think that's the case because later, Lodi mentions hostile NHI population. So I have no clue what's going on with that unless there's a different meaning that you might have interpreted that I'm not right there.
I unfortunately think this was something that I asked at Bungie and got the answer to and then promptly forgot. I think. So unfortunately I can't help with this one. If it comes back to me, I will I will let you know.
100%. Yeah, Singularity opening nearby is something I also wanted to call out in the notes of all this. Purely on the basis that singularities in Destiny can mean the big capital S singularity of, that's like black hole stuff, that's dangerous. It could also indicate points of travel, points of ingress, moments at which you are able to sort of shift back and forth, because that kind of stuff has sort of been used before. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me, and we'll talk more about it at some point, inevitably, is a place called the Cocytus Apertures. Basically, you would jump through portals in order to get places and be pulled into the Nine Realms or into the throne world of Crota. So, like, it feels as though it's in that same vibe.
Maybe I'll throw out some portals and you can tell me if you would count them as singularities or not. So next to Eris on the moon, that little portal that takes you to the Scarlet Keep, is that a singularity or would that be something else, would you say?
That, I'd say, is definitely bound up in hive magic.
Okay, so it's almost singularity is like the 9 factions version of a portal. So like, for example, the Ascendant Challenge that we did together yesterday in the Dreaming City, where you go through that black portal at the top of that statue, that would maybe be the Taken version of one of these portals, but again, not 9-y and therefore not a singularity?
Something like that. So when it comes to the Hive and the Taken, it's specifically about where you're going and where you're coming from, right? The fact that you're going into a different plane, into the Ascendant Realm, or using Hive magic to pass from place to place, means you're probably passing through the Ascendant plane to do that, or you're just using Hive magic that opens it up because video game. In this instance, with it being specifically surrounding the 9 and with everything else, I imagine the idea of it being a singularity, it kind of goes back to the idea of how people theoretically travel with black holes in physics. You know, it gets to that idea of like, oh, you know, you open up a black hole one particular place and then it just, you know, you can jump through to the other side of the black hole. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
No, yeah, I will say that is a best guess here. But it's also one of those weird moments where, again, this could be a thing of transport. It could also just be a thing of danger. It's just interesting that it's spontaneously opening, you know? And I don't know if this is referring to the capital S singularity at the center of Kepler, which, you know, is holding the whole planet together according to Ikora, or whether it's a smaller singularity or something like that. It's weird that it's just been called out as opening right in this moment, you know?
Yeah, I think part of the timing of this message will become relevant in a moment as well with our sort of response to what's being said here. Just before we move on though, Strange Matter, it's capitalized in the subtitles. Is Strange Matter something that we've spent a lot of time playing around with in Destiny, or is that a new thing for this new saga?
That is completely new as best I know. It could be some reference to something to do with dark matter, but that's my best guess.
Okay, because I think that there are future references to that as well, so we can kind of keep an eye out for that as we go here.
Absolutely. Right, let's keep on rolling.
Ikora, it looks like we've got a blockade up ahead.
Ooh, and that's the this is the stasis version of the weapon, on the other hand.
Yeah, so the idea with this is that you get an overcharge in the bottom left, you get a buff, and when it's overcharged, you swap to the version of it that's overcharged, and you'll have a situation like that where it'll lightning strike, and then if I use the arc version of it, then I'll get a stasis overcharge, and it'll do that, and you'll get the stasis crystals shooting out from the side. So you can kind of juggle back and forth between the two, which is going to be quite nice, I think, also this season, because in the seasonal artifact, there's a bunch of stasis debuff artifact perks, and so if you're stasis debuffing a bunch of stuff, then you'll be able to use this sort of in conjunction with that.
Very, very cool. I love that. Hey gang, sorry to interrupt the yapping, I just wanted to throw this in here. In this next section, I'm really not very articulate, and I'm trying to grasp at a point which I really don't phrase well. The point I'm trying to make here is that the Strand and Stasis weapons that you see being wielded by these Eliksni seem to be technologically based, and that is novel. There are very much moments where we've seen Stasis in particular wielded by Eliksni. I'm well aware I was indeed around for Beyond Light, astoundingly enough. I just wanted to cut off the one guy in the comments who's inevitably going to go, actually. It's also important to recognize that, yes, the Stasis stuff in Beyond Light comes from the Splinters, but the Splinters originate from the Pyramids, and therefore it is technological, but also it is somewhat divine almost. Whereas this stuff maybe comes from a higher power and maybe comes from a higher source, or maybe just comes from technology. We're uncertain at this moment in time, but it looks as though this was not necessarily something just gifted by a higher power immediately in the same way that the Splinters were. And it also is not allowed the Fallen to use direct capital S Strand powers, or direct capital S Stasis powers, just weapons that seem to be infused with them. And that is the bit that is new. Anyway, back to the yap. I also wanted to call out here, I know I saw some of it later in the footage as well, but yeah, these are Eliksni or Fallen using what look like Strand weapons and later Stasis weapons.
Yes.
Which, I know you've not done, at the moment of recording at least, you've not done Lightfall or Beyond Light.
Correct.
But the really big takeaway from this is that doing this kind of requires some degree of power somehow. Right? So it's very interesting that the Eliksni have these weapons in the first place. The power could just be a present piece of technology that they've been able to acquire. So it might not necessarily be something of huge relevance, but it does need to be something relatively powerful and important for that to be the case. I don't think it's just a gameplay thing.
To make sure I'm understanding you fully, when we are saying power here, we are talking space magic power, right? Like there is some kind of like empowering of them that's happened in order for them to be able to wield the Stasis and Strand. Is that right?
Potentially. The reason why I bring up technology is because we can see that it originates from their weapons and they're not using pure Stasis or Strand abilities, right? So these are not paracausal beings, but the fact that they've been able to tap into this power means either there's an advancement in technology that's happened that allows them to use these previously untapped forces of the universe, or alternatively, something with these powers has been able to assist them in making that jump. So it could be something very small. It could be something so small that it's not even mentioned in the lore. But I think it's very interesting to call out because this is the first time we've seen Eliksni doing this in this particular context. It certainly is the first time we've seen them kind of jumping in and charging weapons like this. So like the Stasis stuff that we've seen with Eliksni in particular before is predominantly bound to a different Fallen house, which I really don't want to talk much about because it's spoilers for you in Beyond Light. But the short version is, it is interesting that they're using all of this with weapons, and it's interesting that we're also seeing Strand being used, which tells me potentially about the way that they're acquiring these additional powers, right? Like,
cool. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Good.
There's going to be people yelling in the comments being like, what do you mean it's the first time we've seen it like this? Everything in Beyond Light. No, I understand, but I'm trying to preserve Milo's having not played Beyond Light.
Yeah, sorry everyone.
brain.
I've only played Shadowkeep so far, so give me time. Give me time.
Yeah, there's going to be there's a few bits and pieces that I won't mention because of spoilers, but like, yeah, no, for the vast majority of this, I think we're okay we should be in the clear to talk about anything else.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, no, preserving the need. Do not spoil. The general point, by the way, don't spoil in any of the times when Milo's playing. Don't be a dingus.
Yes, please. Right, so that's combat cleared, and Ikora's come to have a little yap with us now.
A singularity, a distress call, and now another ancient train. But how do they all connect? More importantly, how can we help? The status of the singularity will worsen with time. We can't do anything about that right this moment. But discovering a locking mechanism this complex and a radio transmission that sounds human means we could be on the precipice of encountering another pocket of civilization. By my triage, the most effective thing we can do right now is find the source of the distress signal. The trail we're following leads past the train, then scatters. We'll need to get through to find who called for help. The mechanism here appears to be missing some pieces. I've tracked materials nearby that closely match the frequency of the device. Find them, Guardian.
So an important thing to call out here, because there's missing context in the footage, is that Bungie had specific requirements of what we were and were not allowed to show. And so at the start of that little bit of dialogue, when she's saying another train, she's referring back to something that happened in a cutscene at the beginning of the mission, but I can say nothing more about that because that particular cutscene is off limits. So just the context there is that you see that right before this mission begins. It's not like some crazy other thing that you've all missed out on. That's what that is.
As for what these trains are, I have been seeing nonsense about these since the reveal of Edge of Fate. And I don't know this to be definitively the case because I do not know what they look like. If someone in the comments knows better and is from Chicago, please correct me. The thing I keep on hearing is that these are L trains or elevated rail trains from Chicago, right?
Yep.
And it
First developed in the 1950s. I think they stopped production in the late 50s, if I recall correctly, and then they were in use until 1992. And that doesn't mean that these trains are from 1992, to be clear. They're from probably the 60s. But they are very much the Chicago trains that we've identified. That's definitely what they are.
which is even weirder because again they're just merged into the background with Kepler there, and it looks like they're growing out of whatever the massive green and yellow fungal nonsense in the background is.
Yeah, there's a decent amount of stuff on Kepler which feels quite wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, and this is one such example of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is part of the reason why the Eliksni here, if we're saying that they've made some kind of technological advancements that you wouldn't typically expect to see from other fallen houses, they might have been able to do that because of the fact that Kepler itself has sort of brought that technology to them rather than it being the other way around. And so they've sort of gone, okay, well, if the planet's serving up tech, we might as well use it. If it's serving up trains, we might as well use it. Like, that might be what's happening there. And that may well be why they have jetpacks as well. Who knows? But that's sort of all speculation on my part.
Yeah, I think there is actually something to that there. Like, as a point of just general speculation, the Eliksni are phenomenal at kit bashing. Like, they will take bits of random tech, and they are well known to be able to turn just what would basically be seen as a pile of junk into the metaphorical equivalent of mechanistic gold. So sitting there and seeing them creating jetpacks out of junk is in a way not surprising at all, especially if random bits of tech and random bits of human infrastructure are just being dumped here in the middle of Kepler for some reason.
Okay.
But yeah, let's continue on with this real quick.
Lodi transmitting. Status Moonsick. Adrift. Odysseus protocol active.
Odysseus Protocol. We've heard that before. Wait, there's a backlog. Keep moving, Guardian. I'm going to see if these transmissions can give us any more information.
So I'm going to just really quickly pause here. We have heard that before. It is a minor spoiler, and it shouldn't ruin your experience at all. Do you mind if I say where that's from?
Yep,
So,
go for it.
this is something that you can pick up as a random additional bit of dialogue that you get for interacting with a terminal inside of Vesper's host. This is the first time we heard that specific line from Lodi, where it says Lodi transmitting, status Moonsick, adrift, Odysseus protocol active, right? And in particular, it was sent, well, I won't say that particular bit, but anyone who's played Vesper's host knows what's going on with that and where it was sent from and through, which gives us a lot more interesting ideas as to what's happening in that dungeon. The fact that it's directly being confirmed as connection here is really good because it, removes any doubt as to who was sending that transmission, but it is just to say, yes, we've absolutely interacted, at least with part of Lodi's transmissions before.
Right. Yeah. And the nature of it, Odysseus protocol, I mean, I have a copy of the Odyssey next to me right now.
Right. You understand exactly what it is. It's him saying, hey, I'm really far from home and I'm kind of trying to get back.
And I've been far for a while as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful. I would love more than anything for this to be Destiny's The Odyssey. Like, that would be so cool. So listen, Allison, I'm counting on you. Please, I'm crossing all my fingers.
You know what? I want to know what the equivalent of Lodi being trapped on an island with a Cyclops is at that point. You know?
Yeah.
Honestly, if you've not, do yourself a favor. If you want to jump into a single piece of classical literature and understand things, find a translation of the Odyssey. Like, just, you know, have some fun. It's a fun story.
I really recommend, and this is controversial, but I really recommend Emily Wilson's translation. Some people don't like her translation because it feels like quite plain prose, but I think it's perfect because it's so readable and it's not pretentious as well, which is really important with this stuff. If you read some of the romantic translations from the 1700s, it can be very flowery, but then you just get bogged down in it and you just get lost. Whereas with Wilson, you can understand what's going on, and I'm gonna end my frothing at the mouth about that translation there, but I really can't stress enough. I think it's great. So yes, moving on.
I love that I have a fellow nerd in this community like right now. This is great, dude. Okay, let's keep going. Let's do this.
So this is actually me just very briefly interacting with some objects that I didn't realize would have future significance, but they do. We'll see that happen in a second. All the Russian here, my understanding is that this has been translated to just be the solar system.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it.
The thing that's a little odd, can we go back to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to wait for the bit where I sort of stand back. Okay.
Is it that Io is singled out there as one of Jupiter's moons, as is the moon for Earth?
Yeah, so there's a circle for Pluto, but there's no name, seemingly. And Io is present. And why it's called out in that way, I don't really know. The source of this whole structure, in terms of who built it, is a bit mysterious as well. The fact that there are Russians here, because as we'll see later in the footage, there's also some Chinese, and there's also, I think, some English. So you've got a bit of a hodgepodge of different peoples that have all seemingly come together to either construct this station on Kepler, or then there's the question, if the train situation has happened again, of whether or not this station has been pulled from another time. Like, is this stuff that was actually constructed on Earth and has been sucked onto Kepler? So that's a mystery unto itself that I don't have the answers for just yet.
So I think the presence of Io and Earth in particular here actually gives us a really interesting hint as to what the timeline of all this is. So the reason why Io is of significance is that it is the last place the Traveler touched before the collapse came. So the Traveler was midway through terraforming Io when the Black Fleet and the Witness arrived way back in the collapse. And at that point, it abandoned its progress on Io. So Io is now half terraformed, and it fled to Earth where it made its last stand. Now, as it currently stands, Io is still gone. Like, the Witness abducted it at some point. Spoiler alert for you, but you'll see some of that
Wait.
Yeah.
The what?
Yeah, no, hate to say it. This is the gotta rip the Band-Aid off this one, but yeah.
That's fine, but where is it going? What?
So it is.
I've got so many questions.
It's currently lost within the Ascendant Plane, as best we know. Either the Ascendant Plane or a dark portion or place within it. Like, it's been described in a few different ways. One of them has been described as breaching Acheron's wall, but one of these kind of like dark dimensions. But like, Season of Arrivals, this happens to a bunch of places, and Io is the one I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off of now. I think you may have had some other ones of them ripped off as well, depending on what you've done and what happens. And did you end up doing Ghosts of the Deep? I forget.
Not yet. Yep,
okay,
still
cool.
not there yet.
Gonna go ahead and leave other bits and pieces like alone with that one. But yeah, no, Io is the one I'll rip the Band-Aid off of right now. Regardless, the fact that it's here on this star chart indicates that this might actually be something from the kind of end of the Golden Age, because I feel like it's the only reason why you would highlight Io within this grouping, right? Like, it's Terra-centric because it highlights Earth and it highlights our moon, right? So it makes sense that the moon is here. For Io to be here in the first place, it needs to be a place of incredible significance, because you've got to remember, it's only one of 4 Galilean moons, and it's actually, it's kind of the most hostile of the bunch. Like, Ganymede is the biggest. You've got, I believe it's Callisto is one of the ones that's more likely to hold life because it's a big old ball of ice, and that means there's potentially water vapor somewhere. But Io it's just a mess. It's a big old volcanic rock that is being pulled apart by the gravity of Ganymede and Jupiter, and so it is constantly erupting. So there's no other reason I can think of for them to be highlighting Io in particular on this star chart. So to me, this implies that maybe this colonization of Kepler happened sometime during the very late Golden Age. And if so, this also kind of explains the things going on with languages, right? Because there were definitely still powers on Earth. Like, we had a general consensus of all the powers just sort of like becoming less important when the Traveler came along and sort of unified humanity to a certain extent. But the three major groups that found the Traveler on Mars initially, and the three major groups that are still somewhat represented throughout a bunch of the lore in Destiny, are the three major spacefaring powers of the time, which is the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, and the United States of America. So hence why Russian, probably Mandarin, and then English, right? Those are the scripts that I believe you would have seen.
Okay, that would fit that very well. We will see some warning signs around the map that are in Mandarin, I suspect. So yeah, we might have an answer for why those are there. I also think if what we're looking at is Io being called out here separate to Jupiter, and this is pre-finishing of the terraforming, that might be why Io doesn't seem to have this sort of denomination of like a proper ring around it. It's just a name. There's no like sphere there, maybe, but I don't know if the rest of these things, were they all terraformed by the Traveler? Did the Traveler go everywhere, or what was its path?
We don't know exactly everything that the Traveler terraformed. The ones we know for sure are Mercury, Mars, Venus. I think Titan as well is in that group definitively, because I mean, yeah, there's structures that are built on Titan. There is the possibility of Neptune, although I don't know about that one, purely on the basis that Destiny plays a little bit loose with the sci-fi on how that particular one works, and it's not entirely clear as to whether that was touched by the Traveler or not. But, you know, that's me spitballing on the fact that Lightfall exists and things there exist, and yeah, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil you of different bits and pieces, but to be really clear, there is no documentation confirming that the Traveler went there. It's also just worth noting, we don't have a full list because of the kind of collapse of information in the collapse. Like, this is very much one of the traits of the good old days of D1's mystery, is that we did not know the entire picture of where the Traveler went, right? Like, we had whispers. My favorite whisper, by the way, is Ganymede, the moon of Jupiter that I mentioned earlier, which biggest moon in the entire system, so large that it's kind of comparable to a planet. But like, you know, we've heard whispers for a while that there was a massive colony there. We've never seen it, you know? So like, this is just another aspect of mysterious destiny that's kind of being thrown out with this kind of like planetary array.
Sweet. Yeah, I was sort of gonna make a final point there that the right-hand side Pluto, but not named as Pluto, having half a hemisphere around it, whereas all the others have, like, you've got the full rings to its left, but then that has a half ring. I was like, that's funky. Like, is there more that is being indicated by this? But again, I mean, it could also just be more or less that this is a thing on a wall because it's a video game. Yeah. So
I mean,
it'll be somewhere between the two, I'm sure.
I subscribe to the theory this is just Bungie bullying Pluto, but I mean, that's just me. It's fine.
Yeah, that might be it. It's on the naughty step on the right hand side there.
All right, let's keep going.
Yeah, I think I looked at it for a little while because I was like, yeah, it's got to mean something.
Honestly, I'd be right there with you though, because like, yeah, when you discover a fascinating bit of context in the world like that, it's hard not to bring it up and put it down.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, also,
birds.
Have we seen parrots in Destiny before, or like birds? Is that a thing where you just have random wildlife that's just hanging out?
So kind of. We have batidactyls on Nessus, and we've had larger batidactyls on Venus. As for what these are, I don't actually know. Maybe Martin can zoom in. But like these small bits and pieces of fauna that you occasionally get on planets, like they tend to appear wherever there's life. But it's really weird seeing them here because, I mean, it's Kepler. It's very far out from the sun. There is, as best I can tell, next to nothing that creates a supporting ecosystem for life this big. Maybe these are the biggest natural creatures that you can actually find here. And if that's so, then it kind of indicates there's a food chain below this for them to survive, even if it's just like, hey, they feed on microbial life somehow, which is really cool.
It's quite a big decision. It sort of might seem like a small thing for a game dev to just put a random animal in its space universe world, but at the same time, the implications of that mean, yeah, okay, how is it alive? And I don't know the mechanics of like how Guardians breathe, for example. I don't know what the sort of situation is with that, but does that mean that these guys are breathing an atmosphere? They don't need to rely on a helmet? Okay, well, what does that mean about what is going on Kepler? Like, that makes me think about those sorts of things, but they're also very pretty, which is a nice addition. They're a nice sort of bit of visual flourish for Kepler in the way it looks. You'll see those birds quite a bit. They're all over the place. And it also makes me wonder, I mean, if we've got a small one, this is Destiny. Where there are small ones, there are big ones.
One. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a cool boss at some point to fight a little dinosaur or something.
Man, I'm still holding out for another Ahamkara, but hey, we'll figure that out in time, I'm sure.
Yeah. These have got beaks. It's halfway there, I guess.
Yep. Absolutely. I got to agree with you as well. It's really nice to see just pretty bits of wildlife, but the entire skybox as well is just beautiful, gorgeous in the background.
Yeah, it's really nice. There are, I think, some shots where I sort of take a better look at that as well. There's quite a bit of stuff up there that I'd like to ask about, but first, this is very important.
Your vitals stabilized. Must be a fluke.
So, oh my gosh, is that important? Right, so this is a theory that I think and I'm sure a bunch of other people in the community have held for a very long time. We're going to just briefly look at the subtitles text here, which I'm so glad is enabled in this recording because it's so important. Take a look at the subtitles. Also, take a look at the very beginning of them where it says the Roman numeral for 7. And then also in the top right where it also repeats the Roman numeral for 7. This is one of the planets reaching out to us. This is a member of the Nine talking to us. You can tell that doubly because in the lore, there are specifically planetoids, I should say planetoids. It gets to that conclusion, but there are specifically moments where you see this exact kind of formatting of text being used. In particular, the text where it is all lowercase and there's just pluses every once in a while, right? Oh. And the interesting thing is there are 9 different forms of this text formatting that I have tracked across the different lore entries that we have. So each of the 9 can be identified. More importantly, at the very end, you see a lore book dropping up there which says 9, the sun. And I believe there'll be another one later for 5 being Jupiter, which means right now we're listening to Uranus. And the important thing about all of this is now, not only can we divine which of the 9 is speaking, we can understand more about what their individual intentions are. We can even see the moments at which they are specifically reaching out to us, and we might be able to even determine which side of the divide that they might be on. Because again, remember, in the past bits of lore, there has been that 5-4 divide between the minority of 4 and the majority of 5. And this basically, along with all the cutscenes that we got in Rite of the Nine, it really just helps to completely blow the doors off of everything that we've been seeing about the 9 and understanding which of them is speaking to us, which of them is doing what. This is so important in the first few bits, and I'm so thrilled that we have something like this. This is Bungie willingly taking a massive unveiling moment for a lot of their lore, whilst still keeping a lot of their mystery, right? Because we still don't know what the hell the 9 want, and understanding what they are aside from planets reaches into the realm of, hey, how would you like to understand horrifying cosmic beings, you know?
Yep. I also had Allison, the narrative director on Destiny 2, stood directly behind me when I first sort of witnessed this moment, and it started playing, and I leaned all the way back in my chair and was just stunned by what was in front of me, and she just looked at me and burst out laughing. Even for a new player, it's very obvious that this is a big deal, and I love little tidbits of almost a Destiny poetry that you get across different missions, different puzzles, different lore books, etc. And to get another one of those here is very exciting. So I can't wait to sort of dig in. I mean, when we're talking about things being unsheathed, then that is making my naive perspective on the story think about all the sword logic and Hy-Vee things and bits and pieces that you've got on that side of things, all the edges that we have, the endless edges in Destiny. But then all this one hand gifted, one hand recoiled. Like, I have no idea what's going on there. Reach through cranial calcium expansion. Like, I'm lost, but I like being lost.
I think I have an interpretation for this, which...
Oh, hit me.
So basically, because the 9 are planets, they see us as less than ants. Interacting with an individual one of us is not interacting with a person so much as it's interacting with a tool towards their greater goals. So when it says yet to be unsheathed, one hand gifted, one hand recoiled, I think this is one of those moments where this is Uranus looking at us and basically sitting there and seeing us as a tool. You know, we are the thing that is yet to be unsheathed, and we have one hand gifted, one hand recoiled, is basically sitting there and implying that we are unsure of whether the 9 are friends or foe, right? In that moment, it then says reach through cranial calcium expansion, right? This, I think, is them literally saying that they are reaching physically into our brains, which is terrifying, but also it levels with what's then later said with Ikora saying that your vitals spiked. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, yada, yada, yada.
It's a fluke, yeah.
It's a fluke. Yeah, I think that is entirely to do with the 9 basically first interacting with us here and reaching out.
I mean, to further that, kinesis is undirected movement of a cell or organism, in part potentially in response to an external stimulus. So if we are the organism in question and we are reacting based on the external stimulus of the cranial calcium expansion, then that all sort of lines up. So I like it.
100%. Honestly, just love that this is even a thing. This is fascinating, and I really hope we get to see more of this throughout the Edge of Fate campaign. I'm so jazzed that we see this in the first mission too. Like, this is peeling back the layers on what the bigger mystery of what's really going on Kepler is, and I love that.
Yep.
Also, it's really cool. Each of the 9 has a symbol associated with them too, which I just love.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it also makes me wonder,
Stabilized.
because we got that
Must be a fluke.
interaction when we interacted with that device, kind of makes me wonder if there's going to be certain 9 beings, planets, or what have you, that interact with us through certain means and others through other means. Because a thing in zombies, for example, will be a sort of a fairly old reference to make now, but in the 2012 era of Black Ops 2, we had this whole story where you had one character that could basically one character who could basically communicate with us through means of electricity, but then another character who could communicate only when electricity was completely not present. And so it would be quite interesting if the 9 are varied in their approaches to the way that they kind of give us those cranial calcium expansions or whatever else they might be doing. That could be a fun thing to sort of look out for as well.
Right, and it might also speak to kind of like the vague vibe of what each of the 9 is doing. Like, at that point, it looks like Uranus has basically sat there and taken a moment to specifically invite itself in. Whereas it could be the case that one of them kind of pulls a Witness from Final Shape campaign and just immediately rudely reaches through and sends us momentarily reeling to our knees, just so that it can get its piece. Right?
Right.
The one thing I think...
look forward to that happening.
Oh, yeah. I think the one thing that is universal, though, is that assuming that everything we've heard about the 9 is true, it's probably got to have some connection to dark matter for them to communicate. But regardless, this is some really cool exploration of all that. And I love that idea because, yeah, it could tell us a lot more about the 9 as well. Also, there's this moment here, which...
Yeah, so the context on this is the thing that said my wrong molecular structure that I was standing on earlier in the footage. That was a Matter Spark pad, and I'd not yet got the ability, whereas I now have the ability. There's Ghost talking to us here as well.
Molecules are moving unbelievably fast.
Guardian, this energy pattern is distinct from your expected paracausal signature. It matches the dark matter readings from when we landed. It appears you've managed to somehow fuse with dark matter.
Which, man, this is so cool. But so sorry, what were you just saying?
No, just the so the animation of us fusing with it. I was going to ask, is that something we've really ever done before? Do Guardians often go to planets and just stick their hands in random generators and turn into dark matter, or is this a new thing?
I mean, putting our hands where we're not supposed to and just interacting with weird forces, paracausal or not in nature, yeah, that's absolutely a thing Guardians do. You don't always get one of those per expansion, but it's a very common thing for them to just sit back and be like, okay, look, listen,
I'm gonna stick my finger in the socket and see what happens.
Yep, unfortunately so. We are children in that regard. We're terrible with this, but we're okay because we can constantly be resurrected.
Hell yeah.
The thing that I love about this, though, it harkens back to something that was mentioned in the Edge of Fate reveal, which is that you interact with dark matter a lot in Edge of Fate. But of course, dark matter can't actually be seen or experienced in any way normally. However, on Kepler, apparently there's meant to be a microbe which makes dark matter visible, which I think is why we can see Matter Spark, and it's why there's this massive glowing green field around the big old socket where you initially get Matter Spark. So, like, this appears to be us interacting with the microbe in order to do that. How the mechanics of that's working go on, I have no clue. Your guess is as good as mine, but it's a really cool demonstration of that just from the like the aura vaguely that has.
Yeah, the green eggy stuff, as far as I understand it, is the reason why all of that is possible.
Yeah, and I, brilliant for the aesthetic of it, even if it do look a little bit gross, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it does.
But, yeah.
So a point to call out for gameplay here is that this is my first time obviously playing it, so some of the stuff that I'm doing in the gameplay is not what you're meant to do with Matter Spark. Like, I didn't know how it worked, so I was just sort of playing around. And this is also the very beginning of the story. This is one of the things you can do, is you can zap these generators. This is the beginning. As you play through on Kepler, you'll get like upgrades to your abilities, which the devs talked about a little bit in the reveal stream, but we need not go into that here because we're just keeping this spoiler free. So we're just going to focus on the abilities available during the first mission, which initially here is this Matter Spark. Now, it's got a 30-second timer. Again, you are not meant to jump up and down in front of this little cylinder thing. That is not an interaction that actually does anything. This is just me experimenting and playing around. And that's going to be a big part of the overall gameplay on Kepler, is getting a new tool and then being like, how does this interact with the sandbox? Can I use it to zap this thing? Can I use it to jump through this hole? Can I use it for this and for that? And so expect there to be a decent amount of those sort of mysteries as you play through.
And this, I think, is the clearest possible demonstration of what they're talking about with the Metroidvania-ification of this particular expansion, which is really cool. Like, being able to then jump through and explore, and even the way that the entire aesthetic of a camera angle looks whenever you're doing that. I've seen some of the later bits. You'll go through tiny corridors and it feels genuinely claustrophobic, but also you know where you're going. There's a little bit of mystery at the end of the tunnel. It's not a huge thing as far as like, this changes the game. No, it doesn't really make a huge change of the game in the moment, but it's still very cool to sit there and see.
Yeah, there's also some stuff when we get into those tight tunnels that I should specifically call out, because there's some feedback that we gave the devs, and they responded and said, we've actually heard that feedback before, but we have some reasoning for why it's the case. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so we'll come back to that in a moment here. Have we ever seen any servitors covered in bogies before?
No.
That's new, right?
This is actually something I think I will call out here too as well. The entire faction palette is new here, right? So a general rule of thumb, right? When it's a different faction in Destiny, sometimes Bungie reuses a bunch of the different like skins that they already have in the game for the different enemies, and sometimes there's a new palette to them. So this is a great example of what we used to see a lot in Destiny 1, which is that every different House of Fallen would have like different colors to them and a different aesthetic and a different vibe. Not the huge changes back in D1 aside from the color, because I mean aside from Rise of Iron's Splicer Fallen, you couldn't really do that. But here they harken back to the House of Exile, which was originally on the moon, and their primary color, and the thing about them was they do not necessarily have a Kell.
Yep.
They are in that position of hell yeah, nice Nova. Love it when the boss teleports out of that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's always the best, you know? Yep. Classic Warlock moment.
Gonna need Martin to censor myself there. My apologies. But yeah, no, it's this is very much harkening back to what the House of Exile's aesthetic has been, merged with, by the looks of things, Kepler. Because like the servitors they had back in the day were pristine and clean, but this looks like it's grimy and it's covered in wires, but also kind of covered in the fungus or microbial stuff that's all over Kepler. So like, as an evolution of the aesthetic of the house, it's really cool. I mean, you can see it here on the Shanks too.
Yeah, it's all over the place. That eggy business is really life finds a way, you know, and it has found a way, and the way was apparently inside the Shanks.
Yeah, hitching a ride on the side of a Shank. Oh, lovely, pleasant. Oof. But yeah, it totally fits with what they've been doing.
Yeah, the fungus also serves a gameplay purpose in that it helps you spot a lot of the locations where you need to go with Matterspark. So it's basically Bungie's yellow paint for this encounter, or for this location rather.
Okay.
I didn't know that yet at this particular moment in gameplay, but I begin to learn that lesson quite soon. You'll see that a lot of the pipes that I go through, even the Matterspark source that you see there, it's got the green splotchy all over it. There's another source of it. There's all the green splotchy. But then elsewhere, there's less green splotchy, indicating that there's less of a helping hand directing me over to, for example, where I'm at right now. But yeah, you'll see it on pipes that I'll traverse through later and things like that as well. It's a little bit of a nudge in the right direction sometimes. Which,
I'm going to go and look up the word for this. But Bungie does this a lot, is the short version of what I'm trying to gather from this. There is a specific word that I am forgetting, which I'm sure I'll find in just a second, that is specifically defining like, oh yeah, this is something that you get from the gameplay that you will experience reflecting the narrative. Ludonarrative, that's what it's called. So
yes, so it's ludonarrative harmony specifically.
Yeah.
Because you'll also get ludonarrative dissonance, which are in instances where the thing that you're doing in the gameplay doesn't feel like the thing that is trying to be conveyed by the story, and it can feel quite annoying and bad. Whereas, yeah, ludonarrative harmony will be scenarios where the story's attempt to convey a point or a meaning happily lines up with what the gameplay is also trying to achieve.
Yes, indeed. And I'll throw this out there too. A massive focus of a lot of stuff that goes on in Destiny generally is about making a really consistent ludonarrative, and this is just another example of it. It's little things here, but like anyone who's played the game will know what I'm talking about, and it's been going on for literally years. I mean, I simply need to go ahead and mention something. You won't have heard or known what this is. It's not a massive spoiler, but anyone who knows what the idea of deep sight and the animation for that is and whatnot will understand what I'm talking about with that. Anyone who then sits there and sees the idea of what stasis is will understand that perfectly too, because I mean, you know, how much more literal can you get with ice powers than the idea of it is control and whatnot, and then literally being able to stop someone in their tracks. Like, there are great moments of Destiny's ludonarrative, and the fact that the microbes are basically showing you the bits you can interact with via dark matter here. Again, it's just another example of them doing what they've done consistently for the last 10 years of Destiny. Like, I'm just a big fan of that. Like, Destiny's ludonarrative has always been really good.
Yeah, they've got a very strong design language as well, and that really helps things always feel nice and cohesive. I did find in Kepler there are certain areas where my sort of pathfinding was a little tricky. I found it a little difficult to know where exactly I needed to go at certain times, because they're really trying to open up the sandbox to allow you to sort of roam a bit more than you would in a traditional campaign here. And I'm sure that's going to have consequences for the way that you cover the story as well, because now in a way that maybe has not really happened in the past. I'm not sure. You're going to be able to carry out the events of the story in differing orders. And so, for example, if we take Shadowkeep, because it's one of my only references I can make to something I've played,
Linear narrative,
in Shadowkeep,
right?
you can do the nightmare hunts in different orders, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
so
Yes.
I would ask the question of, like, is there a canonical order? Like, does one happen before the other? Do we care about that? Because in Kepler, things will definitely happen in differing orders, and that might mean something, and that might be a new sort of challenge that we have to reckon with in terms of how that affects the story.
Yes, I think that when it comes to Shadowkeep, at very least, you have a few options that open up during the end of the campaign, but there are some that you have to do sooner, right? So Omnigul, for example, is the first true nightmare hunt that everyone will do. Like, you fight Crota in that first opening mission, for example. But
Correct. Yep.
like, yeah, like, it's for the most part closer to the end where things open up that everything changes. Also, can we talk for a second about this new scout rifle that you're using? I think it's a scout rifle, at least.
Yes, it's a scout. In one of my videos, I mistakenly call it a pulse. I apologize in advance if you've seen that video already. It is a scout. It's called the third iteration, and it's awesome because when you aim down sight, you will see your crosshair tightening, and once it's fully tightened, if you crit kill an enemy, you will then get invis for a few seconds. You will also mark the enemy, and then hitting marked enemies causes you, I think, to invis again. You also do more damage to marked enemies, and it's a rare instance of a scout rifle that actually feels nice. I don't think there's any other scouts in the game that I have ever said that about, so it's nice that Bungie's basically looked at a weapon archetype that doesn't get a lot of love and said, how do we make this fun? And it really does feel fun to use. And then when you're not ADSing, it almost feels like a slug shotgun. Like, it's got a little bit of spread to it, but not a lot at all. And yeah, it's great.
Also, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right. You'll know because you've used it better. The fact that there's 3 dots on the reticle and that it slowly pulls in, if you're not fully charging the shot, is kind of got an explosive behavior where there's multiple shots actually hitting at once.
Yeah, so it's a little spread, I believe, when you're not ADS'd, and then when you finish the ADS, they essentially combine into a single round, and it's that single round that then gives you the marking ability. You could actually see the servitor just then before I killed it was marked, and it's also that will then give you the invis if you crit kill an enemy or precision kill an enemy.
Which,
as well.
Also huge void synergies, needless to say, which is very, very cool. But yeah, I think we've got a few words from Ikora here as well.
Yep.
Why send a train to invite us to a black hole? It seems whoever sent our invitation values consistency and catastrophic interference.
About that. I got info, but you're not gonna like it.
Try me.
The gravimetric distortions, the dark matter, the weird train. An invitation? There's only one group of jokers I know who get up to those kinds of theatrics. The Nine.
Well, that certainly is a theory. Although I would expect to have already heard from the emissary if that was the case.
So, a few things I'm going to call out. First of all, Skybox rather, gorgeous, absolutely wonderful. But you can see some really cool things in it, which is, first of all, the Drifter's ship and the massive thing that he pulls behind it, the Hall, up there in the sky. You also have just an aircraft carrier just casually perched out there in the middle of the sand, you know?
Yeah, it's just hanging out, dude. It looks very much, to be honest, like a Star Destroyer. Like, it's really giving those sorts of vibes to me of just a crashed ship that nowadays everyone just sort of plays around on for fun, but back in the day was actually a massive weapon of war.
Big kind of Jakku vibes, right?
Yeah. Whereas in this case, yeah, it's just some kind of, I don't know why it's there. I don't know. Has it been sucked again from Earth? Presumably. Why that? Like, why is that the thing that got sucked through? If the trains are being used as an invitation, if there is some kind of puppeteer who is causing that to be the choice of item to pluck from Earth, why the hell have they plucked this? Lots of questions about why the hell that's there, but it certainly looks cool.
Oh yeah, and so the other thing to note about this, we mentioned earlier that the Fallen are very good at kit bashing things, and maybe this is part of where they got some of their tech from. Yeah. If they've been able to pull parts out of any aircraft carrier, regardless of what it is, you've got some, you got some stuff going on there that the Elixir could definitely do things with. I also wanted to call out though, this I think is a throwback to a very old piece of D1 concept art, which is basically of Earth during the collapse. And I don't think this was pulled from the collapse, just to be really clear. However, the concept art is literally of an aircraft carrier that has been beached in the middle of a desert, which clearly was a dried up bit of sea. And that ended up probably reflecting old Russia, but we never actually saw aircraft carriers up close like this. So, as just a long-time Destiny fan, this is a really cool throwback that suddenly has become very relevant in a different context here in Edge of Fate. But inevitably, yes, if the Nine pulled the trains from somewhere, then they would have pulled this as well.
Sweet. Hell yeah. Okay. Another question, just while we're on the topic. On the right-hand side of the frame, you can see it's like a squashed hexagon blimp / balloon thing that we've seen all over the place on Kepler. Are those new? Have we seen those before? Because they were in the concept art as well. But I don't know. I mean, they kind of look like the guy that's not the witness, but he's like the witness's lackey or whatever. They kind of look like his head, but I don't know why.
Yeah, no. We have only seen them in the concept art thus far. Not a clue what's going on, but it's very cool that they're still present, if that makes sense, because the one thing that we all kind of vaguely guessed was that this showed there's some kind of civilization here. And I think Ikora mentions it later, but clearly the civilization that's here on Kepler isn't just the Elixir that are just sort of scavenging and fighting around, but also there is actual human civilization, and not just Lodi. She mentioned the fact that, there may be a pocket of civilization that's still alive somehow on Kepler. And
yes,
while we don't know what the function of these balloons are, it's just another idea to show that the footprint of this group is relatively large across Kepler generally, which is really cool. Also, before we go on, I wanted to point something out. The boots here, these are Aeon boots, Aeon renewal boots that you get from the loot for this first encounter.
Yes,
which
well spotted.
You and I will know well because it was the freaking chess ARG that included this for the first time.
Yeah, I have a question, because when we were preparing for this video, a little peek behind the curtain for you chat is that we maybe spent 30 minutes or something just like doing a quick scrub to get timestamps for the footage. That's basically all the prep that we sort of put in here. Did you get to the very end of the footage or no? And if not,
then get to the very end, but I think we can save that for the very end.
Okay,
right?
Sounds good. Yes, things are coming.
Things are going to get interesting, but suffice to say, Aeon is associated with the group that was involved in the chess ARG, and I think Allison in the Edge of Fate reveal hinted at the idea that, like, there might be people around on Kepler because, quote, that's an old-ass computer, and clearly they've been around here for some time. So, like this just goes to show that idea of human civilization is very, very relevant, for reasons that we may discover in a little bit. So yeah.
Yep, let's circle back to that for sure. But that great call out on the boots. There's actually an Aeon, as it happens, an Aeon set bonus as well.
Ooh, what's the set bonus?
Specific to them, it is. Give me 2 seconds here. It's Aeon Renewal is its name. The 2-piece bonus basically gives you a speed boost after blowing something up with a rocket or grenade launcher. And the 4-piece bonus means that if you are suspended or you are slowed or you're just at critical health, you can also then get a speed boost as well. So it's sort of about being nimble while also blowing things up.
Very, very cool. All right, let's keep going.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, just in the foreground as well, or in the background, I suppose, there's another of those balloons that you were mentioning too, with a little bit of a closer look. Which again,
I kind of wonder if...
human civilization by the looks of things.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me that the Drifter knows about the Nine and give some kind of context of the Nine. I haven't yet seen where that happens, but maybe you can give me a very sort of brief. Does the Drifter have some history with the Nine that we will learn about? I will learn about soon in the campaigns, or is that more of a
this is stuff that was done predominantly in the season of the Drifter, which was way back just after Forsaken.
Okay.
The short version is he's tangled with the Nine a lot. I think if you're looking at how the Drifter has interacted with them the most, there's two avenues, right? The first of which is specifically through a character that we've mentioned a few times, which is called the Emissary of the Nine. Also known as Orin, for various different reasons. To put it really bluntly, she's had 4, now probably 5 lives, all as different characters. Okay. So that's good fun. The other way in which he interacts with them is predominantly through the means of Gambit. Because, you know, the Hall, the big ball that he travels around with at the end of his ship that's just tethered on the very edge. Yeah, that was gifted to him by the Nine. The entire point of Gambit is basically, you know, it's partly made possible through the Drifter's interactions with the Nine. The Hall, if I'm not mistaken, is described by the Drifter as this thing of pure potential that he just has at the very end of his ship.
Nice. Very fun. Okay, so that is quite the gift to have been given. Quite a responsibility as well to just have pure potential at the end of your ship. But
it's also part of the reason why you're able to fight Taken within Gambit. The Taken that you experience aren't Oryx's Taken from way back when. They aren't new Taken controlled by the Witness or anything. They are a separate group that is seemingly under the sway of the Nine and that is able to be manifested within that kind of area. The Drifter has been able to sort of then exert some control over them too via the use of Gambit. So it's a very interesting thing that he has there, a very interesting tool.
Yeah, makes sense. The Drifter loves games. The Nine love games. It's a match made in heaven.
Hell yeah. We've got some dialogue from people though. Let's take a listen to this.
Yep.
I'm going to rerun the telemetry to see if I can find another radio transmission. Get us some answers.
Achieved precarious stabilization, but still request evacuation due to hostile NHI. If we can't close the singularity, we're pulling everyone in with us. Anyone? You out there?
Odd. The timestamp on this transmission doesn't make sense. It comes after the Mayday, but the timestamp says it was recorded many months before. Either someone is intentionally trying to scramble these transmissions, or the singularity is causing more problems than we thought.
So, a few things to call out here. First of all, I think I have a new theory as to what HI and NHI are.
Ooh, yeah,
I think HI stands for human individual and NHI stands for non-human individual.
I think you're correct. That feels right to me.
Because it's a hostile NHI, and whilst I assumed initially that NHI stood for non-hostile individual, yeah, hostile NHI, hostile non-human individual. That's the Fallen, basically, right?
Yeah, that would definitely make sense.
But yeah, it's fascinating then seeing Lodi talking about this, because it's clear that he also understands not just that, you know, there's people with guns and they're here to shoot us, but also he's talking about the direct threat of the singularity. And that seems to be something that is not only just really pressing for him, but also he understands the greater danger to everyone else out there. The fact that they're then talking about this also being something that's tangled with time because the timestamp on it or whatever is wrong, it just shows more of the power of the Nine. Like, they're not just manipulating gravity and the ability to pull someone through space, but also very clearly, again, you see the L trains, which are from the mid-20th century all the way to the late 20th century. You see these notes about timestamps. Time itself is being manipulated here on Kepler as well.
Yeah, I think also worth scrubbing back to that moment where, can we go back just to two subtitle sentences just to prompt. Oh yeah, I think it's also worth calling out the fact that he says if we can't close the singularity, we're pulling everyone in with us. And that's almost a kind of do or die type sentence, which is sort of at odds to some of the other stuff that he's been saying. Like he's precariously stabilizing it and he's trying to evacuate and things like that. And that's all well and good. But then he's sort of just like, yeah, and I mean, if it all goes wrong, everyone's going in. Like, it's like, okay, Lodi, you're going to just wipe out the other non-human combatants and individuals or whatever that are around you here? Like, are you going to really hit the nuclear button in that way? I didn't know he had that kind of dog in him, but it's telling us a little bit more about his character if that is indeed the right interpretation of what's going on there.
Maybe. I'll be completely honest, I don't think I know enough to actually put my thumb down on it, but regardless, the fact that Lodi here is even aware of it in the first place, it's interesting, right? Because if Bungie has previously described him as a fish out of water, and I wonder if this, rather, a fish out of water, but the most qualified fish out of water.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's something to do with this, you know? Like, why does he know so much about singularities in this particular instance? I speculated in a previous video that he was some kind of astronaut, but that's just speculation. It's just me spitballing. Maybe he's not an astronaut so much as he is someone who has an understanding of astronomy generally. But yeah, it's interesting ideas.
I have a theory about Lodi that I will reveal later in the video that is very silly, and I look forward to sharing with you. But for now, we can keep moving.
Absolutely. Ooh, so mentioning the birds earlier, we also see like just plant life here generally. So we do have like some kind of flourishing ecosystem, and I think that it doesn't confirm oxygen and carbon dioxide, but like it does confirm that there is something that allows these plants to then exist, so to speak. So there's some kind of composition within the air that allows plant life of some kind to exist. And again, I struggle and hesitate to say carbon dioxide because that's what we have plants requiring over here on Earth, as well as sunlight. But I mean, if there's plant life here, then, and if we are going to assume that's the same, it means there's also a breathable atmosphere with oxygen, because that's what they give off.
And that would certainly be useful if, hypothetically, there were humans here, which we may or may not find out more about soon.
Yes, indeed. And also would help, because I'm sure in all the previous stuff we've seen, like Ikora wasn't wearing a helmet just now.
Right.
And I know that in the previous stuff we've seen before of him, Lodi also wasn't wearing a helmet either.
Correct, but is wearing his glasses. So
is wearing his glasses.
If Guardian space magic, the question obviously of whether he's a Guardian or not being a separate thing to sort of interrogate, but if Guardian space magic is enough to prevent Ikora from needing a helmet, then would it not be enough to just give him contact lenses, maybe?
It's a very interesting set of questions. I did speculate on this idea of, like, does the Traveler give you perfect 20/20 vision when you come back? And the reality is I have no idea. We've also not seen whether he has a ghost.
Fair.
Clear out the rest of these elixirs.
We actually see Ikora talking here about, like, yes, the buildings here that you see are indeed human. You do indeed see signs of human occupation, which again kind of hints as to what we're saying immediately throughout the entire like realm of Kepler. There's just signs of humanity generally, which again is it's very interesting. This is basically, I don't mean to drop huge spoilers on you, but this particular point is a little unavoidable. This is the second time we found another outcropping of humanity, right? Which
that we've found. I mean, there is also, I think you could argue, another case for the Awoken themselves having been an outcropping of humanity in the sense that they left, right?
Oh yes, and no, 100%. There's some of the signs you were talking about. So the thing I'm referring to, this is not a huge thing. You find it out literally within like the first few missions of Lightfall. I'm so sorry to spoil some of these details, but it is immediately relevant to this. You find that there are also humans on Neomuna, or on Neptune rather. And so the fact that we're seeing more human habitation out here, it creates a sense of a wider world for me, at very least. It's that thing of like more of humanity survived, and as a result we've got a wider human group population to really work with.
Yeah.
This is the House of Exile.
So yeah, more of a Ghost calling out to the House of Exile. Back in D1, they are actually a house that didn't have a banner for the most part. There was like a banner on something that someone posted, which was actually kind of just a hive symbol. But no, for the most part, they were actually symbolless with just the green. So this is all relatively new, despite what Ghost is saying, at least from my sort of understanding of the game. Either way.
They were mentioned in Shadowkeep, and then, as far as I understand it, were basically never mentioned again. So this is a nice kind of old condiment in the fridge that you haven't used for a while, but now you're like, oh, that could be tasty, and that's what Bungie's kind of picked up on and ran with here. Also, just to call it out, the captain using the little stasis fan as its shield kind of dovetails with what we were saying earlier about how they're making use of stasis and making use of Strand.
Yes, indeed. I'll also say this too. Exile as a house has some very interesting lore because it is literally what it says on the tin, right? Most fallen houses have kells, or have some kind of leadership structure. A kell basically being the equivalent of a lord or a king or a warlord or what have you. The general structure tends to be something like Kell, Archon, and then High Servitor. And that creates a kind of triumvirate of leadership where the Archon communicates between the religious head of the house, which is the Servitor, and the Kell is kind of the political or military leader. And so House of Exile doesn't have a Kell, right? And entirely the point, they are exiles from other houses that all settled on the moon and banded together. So the structure and formation of this house, the fact that it has any infrastructure whatsoever, the fact that it has seemingly some new technology that other houses don't have, is a very interesting indication as to what's happened to them over the years. I kind of love what they're doing with them.
Also doubly exiled now that they are on Kepler.
Yes.
It's far from home, even far from their exiled home.
Yeah, far by any standards at this point.
Yeah, we don't yet know whether they came here by invitation, just as we were invited, or they came here due to some kind of interaction with the Singularity, as happened with Lodi, or something else entirely. But I think that we'll learn a little bit more about that as the gameplay proceeds here as well. So let's keep an eye out for that.
I do also love, like, obviously you've got your limitations when you're in Mantis Park here, but I love that it still feels as though it's a little bit nimble. Like, you don't have your full Guardian jump, but there feels like there's a momentum to it.
Yeah, there's a few different options that you have with it. Yeah, you've got your a dash that you can basically do from anywhere when you're in this third person roaming mode. But then you can also do sort of jump and a boost, which will go a bit further, which I think you'll see at some point in the gameplay here. And it means that you can be pretty maneuverable with it. The stuff that you can do as a Guardian, like rocket jumping and eager edging and all those sorts of things, will obviously never be matched by you being in ball form. But the good thing is you can pop out of ball form at any time. You just press, I think it's E for my keybind here, and I could just pop out whenever I wanted. So you get your 45 seconds of Matter Spark, but then you can also just return to Guardian as required. And you just saw just how high I got just then. That was me doing the kind of boost jump into the air.
Yeah, genuinely mobile stuff. Again, you're completely correct. It's not going to be like an Oog technique for the most part, I hope. Well, maybe it is, I don't know.
Well, we'll see.
It's odd, though. I didn't think they had a leader. It's kind of what they're known for.
Yeah, so this levels a little bit with what I was saying earlier. The Exiles don't have a Kell.
That's the last of them, and we've got what we need. Let's head back to the train and see if we can't get past that blockade.
No more transmissions on the backlog, and the timestamps are all off. Keep heading for the train. Maybe we can triangulate a location.
I think very briefly worth calling out here, this mission felt like it just kept going. Like, I was expecting the mission to be done there, but I am still in the same mission. Despite the fact that they're like, we got what we came for. We didn't get what we came for because I came for a mission complete screen. So, there's a lot of bosses in this mission. Like, there's several encounters where it's like, okay, fight the Crystalline Captain. Okay, fight the this, fight the that. Which I haven't played enough Destiny campaigns to know if that's typical, but one of the things that you have on Kepler is you've got all these opportunities to then go into your Metroidvania toolkit and start using them to solve some of the mysteries as you explore. And you're given the option to do that or to just go back to the mission objective.
So yeah, this is another one of those communications from the 9 that we were talking about earlier, and this I made my own nomenclature for some of these different voices, and I remember this one because this is before we knew they were aligned with planets distinctly and which ones they were. We now know, because this is 5, that this must be Jupiter, because 5th planet from the sun, and then the sun, of course, is 9 itself. In my previous instances, I called this one Gamma. And to put it really bluntly, Gamma was a massive diva, like always talking in this all caps format where they have spaces between every single letter. So you can kind of make out the words, but it takes you a little bit to actually understand what they're saying. They will constantly talk in what is essentially a bunch of different constant statements where everything they say is not necessarily directed with a lot of punctuation. A lot of it is statements, and some of it's very accusatory, some of it's very dramatic and will make proclamations about things. But yeah, I think also adore that for Jupiter. It's very, very cool.
On this first section of Jupiter's statements here, I think it's important to call out the fact that it says, "It is known you are death," and us being described as death will become relevant very shortly, so I just want to put a pin in that so that people are paying some attention to it as we proceed here. And then I also love the fact that it says, "So a beacon of death awaits you." I'm like, oh, sign me up for a beacon of death, man. Like, give me a dozen of them. Yeah, very, very exciting being spoken to by Jupiter in this way.
I'm very glad you called out you are death, so a beacon of death awaits you. I was reading it is known you a red death instead, because of the way the line break works.
Right.
But like, I'm so glad that's that's been made clear, because no, this is very much the problem with reading Jupiter's statements entirely. It all looks like this, and it's kind of hilarious. But it gets quite soupy quite fast. Yeah, it gets incredibly soupy, and it doesn't help with dyslexia, trying to see where one word ends and another begins. But right. The beacon of death apparently invites you, entices you to play, to relish, to shatter it with life. And so that, as we said before, inviting you to play, we know that the 9 love their games, so no surprises there. And then a road made... See, no, it's not a road made easy, because then made would be using the E. Yep. And so it's a road mad easy. It would be a road made as your warpath. Oh God. Right? Oh God. See, right? This is the problem. You need to sit there and really deconstruct each of the sentences, a road made as your warpath, right? Rather than a road mad easy our warpath. That makes so much more sense. It's so much worse too, because the first time I read through this, I read a road made easy our warpath, because I inserted an extra E, right? Yep. It's It's very much one of those things where this will be a trouble with regards to how we read Jupiter generally. But it's very, very cool. And then at the very end here again, it's calling out something like, "Do we have your attention?" Which is apparently what we saw in the last one as well. Yeah, and that is why I immediately nodded after the message ended, because I wanted to make sure that I was signaling my hearing. Yep. God, I do love that those are the interactions here.
Suppose you're right, Drifter, and we are dealing with the 9. You have the most experience with them. What did you observe in your interactions?
Rumor has it the 9 are extra-dimensional. caught in the gravity of Sol's heaviest hitters. You know, planets, moons, stuff like that. There are aliens, and there are aliens. And these guys are aliens. They don't live in this dimension, which means they can mess with you.
The Nine can scheme all they like, but until they affect the real world, let's not give them more power than they actually possess.
Which is very important to call out here because, I mean, yeah, the Nine are abducting trains all over the place. I feel like they can definitely affect the real world, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think also it's interesting Ikora says not to give them more power than they actually possess. I think that just in terms of storytelling and then perhaps also literally in Destiny's story, the idea of attributing power to something and that then essentially causing it to manifest is actually present, funnily enough, in Maricena, which I've just read, and sorry I keep referring back to it. I'm a bit of a broken record here, but the advice that Alice Lee gives Mara at the very beginning of Maricena is that if you're acting as an icon and as a symbol for people, it becomes your responsibility to then be the good force for them that symbol represents, right? And it's interesting here that Ikora is essentially warning us in the opposite direction to say, if we start attributing all this power to these beings that we don't understand, then yeah, it'll become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So she's kind of warning us to be cautious, where otherwise for in a scenario where there's too much freedom in letting ourselves get carried away with assuming that they're all powerful and all knowing and all that sort of stuff, that might end up becoming true. So
yeah,
probably good advice from Ikora there.
I'd also say this is, you're right to call it out too, because this is something that also happens with the Hive Gods. I mean, Savathun has Imbaru and Xivu Arath has the way that planning for war and the mechanism of preparing for war and preparing to fight her empowers her. So like, yeah, this is definitely a thing in Destiny where you get powers that I don't know if the right word is ontomorphic. Basically, by changing the world and interacting with their powers, you empower them. Not 100% certain of that. But yes, the point being, like, you absolutely have that concept going along in Destiny. And the Nine reaching out from another dimension and then potentially being something that we could empower by bringing them into this one a little bit more. Yeah, very valid concern.
I think also it's especially relevant here because of the fact that this is the Fate Saga, and ultimately, if we strip away all the meat off the bone, at its core, it is a story about choice and is a story about what you do with the power granted to you. And as Guardians, for a long time, we have actually not really acted in our own sort of agentic sense of doing things our way, but rather we've kind of just done what we think the Traveler wants us to do. I think that there's an argument to be made that we've been weapons of the Traveler or pawns of the Traveler or what have you for a long time, perhaps even puppets of the Traveler. And I think that now that we're embarking on this Fate Saga, there's going to be this question of making the choice as to what we do with the responsibility that we have to the universe, or whether or not we even have a responsibility to the universe. And I suspect that Bungie is going to very intentionally play with those themes in little tiny interactions like this, just as much as they will with the grand overarching story plot points that we sort of start to see unfold through Edge and beyond.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Before we go too much further, there is a section here where you begin a boss fight, and there's actually a little bit here with dialogue that we're going to go ahead and play really quickly as well.
You trespass the domain of the once exile, chosen of the Giver. I am Archon Prime, sovereign of this orbit, speaker of the voice invisible.
So that reason that we've cut to that sort of separate clip there is that was actually not in my original recording. It's something that I accidentally cut out, basically, but it's just the beginning of the fight here, and you get this little interaction saying you trespass, and also trespass with a capital T, no less, the domain of the once exile, chosen of the giver. And that, from my naive perspective, and sort of let you cook on this, Bife, in a second, but once exile suggests that maybe on the moon, these guys felt like, yes, they were the House of Exile, and that was their lot in life, but they maybe feel a little bit more found now. They feel like they've arrived at their rightful place or something like that, almost where they're supposed to be going. And that could also be echoed by chosen of the giver. They now have been chosen by whoever the giver is, and they then say, I am Archon Prime, sovereign of this orbit, speaker of the voice invisible. And so perhaps the voice invisible is one of the 9. It is one of these planets, and the voice invisible is either the same planet or the same 9 being as the giver, or maybe they have different words for different ones. Maybe the voice invisible is one of them, maybe the giver is another. Perhaps it's the whole suite of them all communicating to the House of Exile here, and the voice invisible is actually indistinguishable for the House of Exile because they might not be able to read the subtitles like we can. So they might not know that one of them is a diva and one of them is a little trickster and one of them is this and one of them is that. But yeah, have we heard of the Giver before? Is that new nomenclature for Destiny?
Totally new nomenclature for Destiny. The Giver is something that has never come up. The only other time it's actually come up is the reveal stream for Edge of Fate, where Allison referenced this exact kind of interaction, where the House of Exile is very interested in the Giver. However, there is a bunch of stuff to unpack from that particular set of lines and that sentences. So first of all, you're totally right that the 9 probably see the Elixni as more tools, and they're probably using them to whatever ends they're going on. So I imagine the Giver is somehow related to the 9. Who is the Giver specifically is a question that we'll absolutely need to come back to, because many questions surrounding that. It could be that this is the Elixni's idea of what the voices generally are. It could be that the Giver is their understanding of who the 9 are, and they think it's one, when in reality it's a bunch of disparate voices. However, there's some really big stuff going on with just the way that the Archon here describes himself, right? So, in particular, you're totally right to talk about him describing himself as no longer in exile and to say that now he's been found. This is a big theme for the Elixni generally. They are a lost people because the darkness invaded their homeworld, they lost it, and now in Sol, they generally speaking are seen as this lost, fallen people. Like, Variks even says, the word fallen is technically a slur for our people, but it isn't technically all that wrong, because we are lost. The exiles were the most lost of all, because they were literally exiled from their houses, and the fact that the Archon here is describing them as exile no longer implies that yes, they now have found a purpose, they have found something that gives them meaning. This is very much a religious thing. And the reason I say religious is because that's the context of an Archon. Archon Prime is a phrase that really is important, right? So Archon Prime is a combination of Prime Servitor and Archon to an extent, right? And the way that we've seen this manifest before is in Wrath of the Machine, where we faced the only other known named Archon Prime, which was, I believe, I want to say it's not Atrax, sorry, I'm going to remember it at a certain point in time. But yes, basically massive. Have you seen Wrath of the Machine? I don't know if anyone's shown it to you.
No, I don't know. I don't even know what that is.
I'll save you the appearance of that boss if ever it comes back in game, or if ever you want to see it for yourself. But it's one of the coolest fallen bosses in the entire thing. The bit I will share for you is that they had achieved what they believed was a form of apotheosis. For people who've played Wrath of the Machine, you know that was a cyborg mechanical apotheosis, because Fallen of the old days believed that divinity was achieved through ascendance into a machine form. However, in this instance, I think the phrase Archon Prime is being used very differently, because it's clear that the vessels of the Archon that are being fought in this encounter, they're not actually mechanical forms, they're not cyborgs, they're just fallen. So I think this is a way of the Archon Prime describing himself as a individual who has ascended to meet godhood and therefore is the mouthpiece of the Giver, which I believe they see as divine. That much I can interpret just from that title.
I'd love to tap into this through two different angles. Number one, so you said before you have this triumvirate of the religious side of things in the Servitor. Then you had what were the other two corners of the three?
Yes, so there's the Servitor, which is seen as the kind of godlike figure, which is partly because it gives ether, which is a life-giving substance, and also partly potentially because of the way that they sort of view the machines in relation to the way that the Traveler was. They literally call the Traveler the Great Machine. The other two parts of it are the Archon, which, again, Archon Prime is what the guy is calling himself here. Yes. The Archon is the go-between between the Servitor and the Kell, who is the third of those groups. The Kell is the political and military leader of each house, but the Archon kind of is seen as one who interprets the word and the will of the Prime Servitor for the Kell. So, again, imagine them as a high priest.
So in this case, then, saying, I am Archon Prime, sovereign of this orbit, to be sovereign of the orbit almost accounts for the Kelly part of the trio. The Prime element obviously accounts for the Servitor part of the trio, and then the Archon bit is still the Archon bit. It's the bridge between the two. So what this chap is seemingly saying is that three have become one, and I now fill all the roles.
And I have a god above me, right? And that god is probably the Giver.
And I am the chosen one to communicate that Giver's insights or messages or commands. And this is very juicy because this will then lead us really nicely into the next thing that we hear from the vessel as well in just a moment.
Yes, let's keep going with that. But yeah, crucially, there's a bunch of different captains that come out in this particular fight. And whenever the Archon is speaking, there's kind of like a little set of strand baubles that come along, if I'm not mistaken, or am I getting gameplay elements mixed up
there's I wasn't exactly sure what was going on with the strand blobs, to be honest, because I haven't interacted with strand outside of the Final Shape campaign, so I only know how it's worked there, but not anywhere else really. So yeah, there was some strand blobs on the side of its little blue shield thing, but I actually don't know what they were really doing. We then get
the ghost saying that the ghost here says that the Eliksni we just fought wasn't an Archon, and that's specifically because like Archons are like one of the most powerful members of a fallen house. They typically are unique. They have heraldry that is above that of a typical Baron or Captain, which is kind of what we just fought there. And the fact that they're called a vessel for the Archon implies that they're able to somehow inhabit these different Eliksni, which is maybe indicative of the power that the House of Exile has discovered that we were talking about earlier.
Yes. So this we will tap into more in a second for sure, but it's interesting because at the very beginning of the video, we were talking about this power and about it being something technological versus something inherent, right? And Ikora has some lines coming up which sort of elaborates on this question a little bit for us here as well, because if there's the words of the Archon coming through another Eliksni's mouth, that might indicate perhaps an inherent power being bestowed upon that particular person or character or being, as opposed to it just being something from pure technology. Like, to me, if you're speaking through someone else's mouth, it's unlikely that you're just doing that through a Bluetooth chip that you've plugged into your PC. Like, it's probably something that you're doing with a bit of space magic. So we'll maybe let the gameplay continue a little here, and we'll get to that audio here shortly.
Absolutely.
In the wake of destruction, one exile falls, and three more rise.
Hold on. That same voice, this Archon's voice, is coming from another Elixir. I'm not sure what's going on.
Exiles, I prophesy the deathless arrival. Creatures cradled and kissed by the infinite curse of the Great Machine.
Deathless? That sounds like you, Guardian, but, derogatorily.
So I've got to go ahead and point out, I absolutely adore the voice acting and the general vibe and voice direction for the Archon. It's so good. He is a mad preacher that I think we've been missing from the Fallen's story for a long time. I think it's basically been since Skolas that we've seen someone kind of like this. And that was House of Wolves. That was literally a decade ago. This is awesome, and it's in English, so we can actually understand it this time. Absolutely adore this.
Was it in Fallen language before?
Yes, and most of the time whenever he was doing it, he was just sort of shouting at a crowd before he would then occasionally communicate in Fallen across the comms to us, where he'd spit insults at us. Which,
oh, fun.
Yeah, you couldn't really make that out. There have been attempts over the years to translate it, which have had mixed success, but of course it's very hard to verify any of this when you're basically just trying to put guesses together. There's only some bits of the language of the Fallen we truly know. But, like, man, there's so much cool stuff to pick apart here. So, for one, yes, it's absolutely the case that he's able to transfer his voice and speak through all of these different, like, major members of his house, hence why you have multiple vessels of the Archon. Which is a power in itself, which I don't know if I can easily explain. There's some Strand nonsense going on with these Archons, so maybe there's something to it that uses capital D darkness as opposed to dark matter, but not totally sure about that. The really cool thing I want to go ahead and point out here is the Archon seemingly had prophecy on his side.
Yes.
And there's a really awesome sentence here. Exiles, I prophesized the deathless arrival, creatures cradled and kissed by the infinite curse of the Great Machine. So he is basically saying, hey, I told you the Guardians were going to come here. And cradled and kissed by the infinite curse of the Great Machine is basically a reference. The Great Machine is the Traveler, and the infinite curse of the Great Machine and being kissed and cradled by it is basically saying we have the powers of the light and we have the constant resurrection. We can never die. We're basically these disgusting zombie things that will always be around because of the way that the Traveler has perpetually allowed us to come back to life over and over again with our ghosts.
And just to elaborate on that also, the duality of being both cradled by the machine and kissed by the machine, but for it to also be a curse upon us, sort of reminds me a little bit of what Seven was saying to us earlier, with one hand extended and the other furled back, or whatever the specific wording was, where you've kind of got the benevolent touch of the Traveler, but you also do have the curse element as well. There you go. One hand gifted, one hand recoiled. It's illuminating the two sides to every coin that come with being blessed by the Great Machine or being cursed by the Great Machine in this kind of way. I thought that was sort of interesting that the Archon in this case is sort of seeing things in a similar way to how Seven is seeing things, and maybe that is indicative of the fact that the Archon is kind of echoing Seven's own sentiments.
Totally possible as well, because again, we don't know what the Giver is yet, and there's entirely the possibility that it could be something to do with the Nine, and, well, maybe the Nine generally, maybe a faction within the Nine, or maybe one of them in particular. So,
I mean, my guess would be that just as the Fallen recognize that the Great Machine has cradled and kissed the Guardian and given us light, if these Fallen are now able technologically to wield Strand and Stasis, perhaps so too do they recognize the Archon's ability to ascend to its form as the 3 points of the house, or the leadership of the house, all in one being. That choosing might be what has been given, and so it might be that they're saying the Giver essentially has bestowed upon us there's power to either tap into the dark matter that allows us to use these elements, or then separately the power to wield some of the dark matter to communicate in this way, and to give a voice to those captains across the sort of different arenas of Kepler. So yeah, maybe that's what's been given, perhaps.
Indeed. Should we keep playing this fight?
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, it's something to note as well. There's a new Bane that's pushed out there, which is Grasp. I don't know what that actually does, but it's the captain that's got it. It looks almost as though there's like strand matter kind of chasing you around. I almost want to say it's something to do with Suspend based on the name alone, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, I'm also not 100% sure on that one. I saw all of the Banes in the customized screen of the portal, so I think that it's probably there, so we can figure it out if the community's totally unsure on that one. But yeah, it'll be something. Anyway, some more audio for us to listen to here.
Strength of the singularity and ascend.
That voice is coming from another elixir.
So this is fascinating.
Yeah, this is big.
First of all, yeah, the grand design bids us to destroy them, bring death to the deafness. The fact that the House of Exile also supposedly has a destiny as well kind of hints back to the idea of, yeah, they're no longer lost in the same way as they were. Like, they now are
and
exile
they've been given meaning, they've been given direction, and crucially, what perhaps in the past for them has been this lost, listless existence feels like it is now leading towards a fate of sorts. And for that to then be just the whims and the wills of the giver, perhaps, is so juicy. I love the fact that they might just be religiously, is what I was saying at the beginning of the video, attributing this grand meaning of the ability to ascend, right? Like, it almost makes me think of the Covenant in Halo going on their great journey.
Yeah, I was going to say, right? It's big great journey vibes.
Yeah, massively so. And for them to have created this religious fervor around this idea, when actually Seven might just be being like, well, you just do what I need you to do, and like, sure, I'll let you just like dabble with a bit of strand stuff or whatever, and have your fun. But actually, you're just completely a tool in my toolkit. That I love. I love the dichotomy of, on the one hand, you have this complete knowledge of the situation, and then on the other hand, you have the ant trying to understand the machinations of the human's brain and calling it a god. Like, it's good stuff. I'm a big fan of that little bit of dialogue there.
100%. Also, strengthen the singularity and ascend is worrying, because obviously now we know that the Elixir are tied to the central threat that was established at the very beginning of, like, hey, they could swallow the entire system up in a black hole. The fact that they're saying do that and ascend makes me really think that they have been clued in somewhat to the agenda, at very least on the vague idea of what the giver, or if it is supposedly linked to the Nine, is meant to be achieving. Right? Because the idea that they're ascending is directly linked to why the Minority of Four was creating the black hole in the first place. They wanted to do so in order to transcend layers of reality into a different, like, plane of reality by going into said black hole. And in doing so, they would then be able to actually no longer have an existence where they relied on our existence, which is, there's a deep lore cut there for the Nine, basically, but essentially, without us, they're like shadows. If you don't have the flame or the thing that's blocking the flame to create the shadow no longer exists. And that's kind of like how the Nine exist, is partly because of us. And that's why they're trying to escape this. The fact that the Archon is kind of picked up on this in a certain way, or picked up on this idea, is fascinating. It means potentially they've been lied to. Maybe they know more about it and they're actually very aware of it. Maybe this is just them reframing what they might have gleaned. Like, really cool that this is something that's been brought forward just as a concept.
So as a potential way of interpreting it, first of all, as you just said, if they're strengthening the singularity and that is what they've been encouraged to do, that gives us the indication that the giver is on the side of the Four as opposed to being on the side of the Five. So that helps us start to draw some table stakes for who's where in the grand kind of fight or conflict of all this, so to speak. But secondly, you mentioned earlier that Fallen historically have fused with machines in some kind of capacity and tried to ascend in their own way historically, with this cyborg being, or becoming cyborgs, or what have you, becoming machines. And so I would maybe throw out the idea that if within fallen culture there is already a sentiment that there is a need to ascend, like if that is just really ingrained within them as a species, then it might be that what's happening here is, in another context, a fallen might say, oh, I can ascend through becoming one with a machine. Whereas here they're sort of being like, well, we know we need to do the singularity stuff, and we know that as a people we need to ascend, so maybe singularity equals ascend? So it might not be that they've even been lied to. It might just be that in their religious sort of hand waving of trying to interpret and understand what's going on around them, they're like, well, these things are bigger than us. This is the human moving around while the ant watches. And so maybe it's just sort of that they're making their best guess as to what might happen there. They may not have any idea of the fact that the singularity being strengthened may then actually wipe them all out, potentially.
100%. And to them, that might be completely oblivious to them in the moment, because they might actually have that moment of like, yeah, the singularity is going to destroy us all, and in the process of that, we will achieve godhood anyway. You know, like,
right.
There's so many different dimensions as to what this could represent, and I love that it's so open-ended to that. Like,
yeah,
we're probably going to find it out as we dig through the lore of the expansion when we have it in our hands, but this already, the Archon is a fascinating character, right? Like, I kind of adore that this is like only a few minutes of interaction. I actually already really love this enemy. Like, it's really
I'm rooting
strong.
for him. Archon supremacy. Let's get it.
Honestly, yeah, like legitimately, he's a stronger villain off the bat than I think we've seen in a lot of other expansions, and that's saying something, because I mean, you know, well, sometimes there is not a great villain in Destiny expansions, and sometimes there is. And Archon feels as though he's kind of trending towards the better side of things.
Just to jump in on that, though, need he be a villain? Because as far as I'm concerned, the House of Exile are on Kepler, and we've flown in here and started shooting them. So, like, maybe we're the villains, you know? Maybe we're the ones in the wrong, because ultimately, if they think that strengthening the singularity is essentially just going to help them ascend and maybe help Fallen everywhere ascend, and they could even have such a wrong end of a stick that they think it's going to actually save the universe, right? And in that scenario, maybe
the bad
Bro's
guys
just,
to them, right?
Yeah, he's just trying his best. He's just putting his shift in to save his people. So I always in Destiny, I have an inclination to try and view ourselves as the demon, to put it into Halo language.
Oh, Milo,
and
dude, I cannot wait for when you do the run up to starting Witch Queen. You're going to see Season of the Splicer, and you're going to see stuff that makes you go completely feral for this exact perspective.
Yeah, okay,
I cannot
perfect.
wait for you to see it. It's part of the reason why Splicer is my favorite piece of seasonal content they've ever delivered. But like, yes,
amazing.
100%, totally valid perspective on this. Love it, 100%.
Hell yeah. Okay, let's keep moving with that in mind. There's going to be some more juicy dialogue in just a moment here.
Also, I'm going to go ahead and say we've been going for 2 hours, and I didn't even realize time has evaporated. Jeez.
Yeah.
I adore that, and also I'm very sorry, and also thank you very much.
No, you're fine.
And potentially for the audience, you're welcome. I don't know.
Yep. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I hope they're liking it.
Yes. A side note as well, you will be able to find another piece of content over on Milo's channel. I'll shout that out again, and also at the beginning of the video, but we'll be going over an interview as well to just sort of pick some things apart there.
Yeah, there's some comments from Alison, the narrative director, which I think I need wife's input on. So that will be coming soon.
I still don't understand how that voice jumped from one exile to another. The witness could possess, but that required a civilization's worth of darkness. Could something have drawn them here? Maybe the high concentration of dark matter is boosting this Archon connection to darkness.
Darkness is about connection of memory, but it doesn't work like that. And dark matter, in spite of the name, has nothing to do with darkness.
So this is something else entirely.
I think that little statement is one of the most important bits of audio in the whole campaign.
Yes, 100%. Bang on.
Yeah. It's essential. It's essential from a meta perspective as well as from the in-universe perspective as well. partly because we are exiting the Light and Dark saga and we're entering the Fate saga, and it's really, really important for Bungie to adequately inform the audience that we are no longer only worrying about, well, that's light and that's darkness, and they're the only things that can drive any machines in this world, right? Or drive any motion, any change. And so for them to say, well, there's some stuff here that we've seen from Darkness that feels similar to what's going on here, but it's not quite right. But then even in our understanding of dark matter, that's also going to take a little bit more digging. But dark matter in itself is completely separate to darkness. Like, that's something which, without complete crystal clear clarification on from Bungie in the way that they just did it, could end up with us going down a rabbit hole of thinking that the darkness is dark matter and they're one-to-one correlated, when actually they're not at all, by the sounds of things.
Yes, and I also love that they clarify the fact that darkness is all about the connection to memory and whatnot, which is completely canonically true here. There's no bad perspective take on that from Ikora. She's completely right. Like, it helps to really set the two elements of the universe aside in another perspective, because, you know, it's not just about, like, dark matter is separate. It's also like, this is what we know of darkness, this is what we know of dark matter. Delineate the two concepts in your brain, you know?
Does that mean... I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but so when I first heard that audio, I was like, darkness is connected to memory. Okay, that's a new concept for me. I didn't know that was a thing. Is that something that's been played with a lot elsewhere, or is that of a...
Okay. Yeah, 100%. So, for one, you'll have played Final Shape, so you'll see there's moments in the campaign where there's points at which you interact with dark and light. So in the very first mission, you have a Crux of Light and a Crux of Darkness that you combine. The Crux of Darkness is a memory of something, and then when you combine it with the Crux of Light, it makes that memory real. In fact, the entirety of the interior of the Pale Heart of the Traveler is made real, but it's based on our memories. So it is darkness made manifest through light, which is why it's this brilliant duality of a world of dark and light in itself, and why, at the beginning, it's things that are familiar to us. The Lost City in the area that's closer to the Lost City is literally a recreation of the tower and the city itself. And as you go further out, you start to see more of the wastelands and the wilds that we know, but it starts to become twisted. And then eventually you arrive at the Witness's monolith and recreations of the place where it unmade itself and created the Witness out of the many, many members of the precursor civilization. And that is entirely pyramid architecture. So, like, again, it's all memory through darkness that is made manifest through light.
Does that mean... Okay, I'm going to tangent here, but does that mean that you could make a kind of weird, wacky, crackpot argument that what we are seeing of Cayde isn't actually Cayde? It's just that because we remember Cayde, we're getting like a manifestation of Cayde that looks like Cayde, in the same way that if we didn't have any memory of the tower, the space that we see that looks like the tower would not look like the tower. It would look like something else, because it would be the memories becoming manifest. Is that also then interlinked with how Guardians, when they are revived by the light, is there an element that it needs to be something that came before, such that then it can be revived because the memory of it and the past, its tenure in the universe is necessary for the light to interact with it in that way? Is that... Am I cooking, or am I completely off of the rails here?
I think you're overcooking, but
okay.
I say that partly because the light stuff has got other theories that establish the ideas of resurrection, but even the ghosts themselves don't completely understand how they do it. But on the other side of things, we know, thanks to the season that went and played before we actually had a handle on Final Shape, that the memory of Cayde is very much something that we see there, and Cayde is actually bona fide real Cayde, but has been brought about partly through the machinations of Wish Dragons. Like, it is so heavily prompted in the lore of the season prior, and then it was actually pointed out directly within Final Shape. So, like, it's a valid question, though, because it's like, yeah, how do you remember the shape? I'll tell you one interesting theory about it, which is that some ghosts have theorized that in the instances where you die, the rezzed version of you is being pulled from another timeline. Now, there's nothing but theory to support that, and it certainly is not confirmed. There could be other explanations, but that's something that's posited by one of the ghosts, which is interesting because they then explain that that's the reason they can't pull you from anywhere in a darkness zone, because for whatever reason these zones exist where there are very few successful timelines and where you need to be able to rely on your own light.
Oh, so, okay, a question then to interrogate my little idea a little further. Have there ever been instances where light creates something novel? Like, totally new? Can a new person be created by light?
I believe, so light is a power of the universe generally and is of creation. Like, if you look at the physical universe, that is all a realm of light in Destiny's kind of nomenclature for things. So to an extent, yes. If you're talking about the real core powers of light and everything, just look in front of you. The ghosts come directly from the Traveler, and they were only created in that moment when the Traveler died. And they have never been seen before. Good point. So yeah, no, that's absolutely something that happens. But even just us as Guardians, if you really are going to stretch it to a thing, from a thing physically to just energy, Arc, Void, and Solar are all things that we manifest and they just appear out of nowhere. We break the laws of the universe to bring these things in front of us. Like, we somehow create a dying, collapsing star within our hands whenever we cast a Nova Bomb. Is the best example I can think of just in this moment. So yes, absolutely. The light is a power of creation.
So if darkness is related to memory, light is related to the present?
Related to the physical universe. There's a great... It sucks because I'm going to sit there and everyone's going to be like, Lightfall. There's a great cutscene in Lightfall that explains this really well.
I'll be there soon.
Yeah, you'll be there at some point soon for sure. But the best way to think of it is that darkness is the world of the unconscious, unseen, the not physical, the immaterial, psychological universe around you. Whereas light is literally the physical atoms, matter, and everything you can interact with, touch, taste, smell, etc.
It is the known.
So physical versus the sort of psychological, I guess, is the easiest way to put it, of the mind and of matter. You know?
Okay, got it. So with all of that said, darkness is now being distinguished from dark matter, and we have this new thing to kind of reckon with. We've also talked about strange matter a little bit. Do you have any historic references to dark matter in the Destiny lore sandbox that has sort of come up much, or is it pretty much that they are doing a new thing here? It's been there before?
Dark matter has been brought up with regards to the Nine a lot. Whenever there's stuff going on to do with the Nine manipulating things, dark matter and gravity and dust tend to come up a lot. In particular, there is a lore book from the Season of the Drifter called Dust, and the main character of that, the very center of it all, which, I mean, if you want to do this before jumping in through Prophecy, I can send you that lore book, but like, she has this fascinating moment where she comprehends the Nine and understands them as their purest form, and it's all to do with the idea of dark matter and how they exist. And totally something that they're picking apart from the old lore of the Nine, which makes perfect sense, you know, because even then the dark matter side of it means they're not aligned with darkness. It's just a way of saying they exist in a manner that we can't perceive. They're in a different, higher reality to us.
Got it. Okay.
Or, I should rephrase that because that seems a little misleading. They're in a different dimension to us, not a higher reality. That breaks into realms of what they want to kind of achieve.
Right. Okay. That's the post-singularity goal almost, is exploring that kind of stuff maybe.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. The reason I ask is this next thing that we are going to witness here in the gameplay is an unusual vessel. And first of all, I sat there and looked at this thing for about 3 minutes before picking it up, to the amusement of all the devs behind me, because I wanted to look at all the symbols that were on the side of this thing. Turns out the symbols are the Edge of Fate symbols. They're the same symbols that we've seen of the 9 previously. They're not any of the new 9 symbols for the individuals 5 and 7 like we've seen in the mission here, but it's the old ones. So the stuff that you see during what's it called?
Prophecy?
Not Dual Destiny. No, the thing where you get the Eager Edge sword, one of the sources of that, the game thing.
Dares of Eternity.
Dares, yeah. Like the symbol you see in Dares, it's those familiar 9-y symbols, which I think are also in Prophecy as well. I haven't played it yet, but I'm pretty sure they're in there too. So those symbols are around the edge of this little hourglass structure. And as I pick it up here, you'll see that it has a name as well.
The Stranglet Capsule.
Yeah, Strangelet capsule. So this is the thing that we have charged up during this little encounter, and as Ghost says there, one of the Archon's lackeys dropped something, but this is not the only device like that, and I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to sort of say in terms of what the UI prompts you with now, but I'm going to be hesitant to reveal too much more just because it relates to the next mission. But let's see what the gameplay says.
Let's leave it at that for the most part then, because spoilers, yeah. But here's the rest of the dialogue.
One of the Archon's lackeys dropped something.
Ophiuchus' energy readings are spiking. This is a container of dark matter, the same connected to the Singularity. Don't let that go.
So just a tiny bit of context here. Ophiuchus is Ikora's ghost. Just so you know.
Perfect. Thank you. I was wondering that. That's useful.
Yeah.
Hold it. Who do you work for, and what's your business here?
Telemetry originates at this location, but the signal is weak.
What are you doing here?
We're Guardians from Earth's Vanguard. Circumstances suggest we were invited, but we don't know who sent the invitation.
Earth?
Have you been here a while?
I have journal entries tallying 4 weeks, but my 5 o'clock shadow says a day. Something's wrong with time. It's my job to investigate. You picked up something that's special to the people here. Use it. I'll see you on the other side. We can talk there. You can, tell me all about Earth.
That's the man who sent the distress signal. But he didn't seem in distress.
Something's wrong with time.
I'm curious as to how our contact intends to fix it. But his observations seem to be correct.
And we just got here. There's probably a whole mess of time nonsense just around the corner.
Agreed. This train's temporal presence is concerning.
That's the least of our worries. The real head-scratcher is our new friend seeing the people here.
Ikora did say she suspected sentient life.
Okay, so before we go into this trippy load of stuff...
Yep.
Lodi is a fascinating little oddball, isn't he? My goodness.
He really is, yeah.
I do enjoy the fact that it's very much... So, it seems clear at first that he has the gun, but he doesn't immediately feel like he needs to use it because, you know, I imagine if he's used the gun, he's probably been fending off fallen attacks. But, like, he's still a little cautious, but it was also... I think he's trying to contain his excitement that he gets to hear about Earth in the very beginning of all that. So it comes across as this very interesting sort of, like, a moment where he's trying to keep a serious face, but also there's probably some relief behind that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's definitely letting it slip out a little bit when he asks the question of just Earth. It's the sort of thing where in his position, if he came from, well, we can speculate about what time period he came from, but if he came from either pre-collapse or mid-collapse Earth timeline, then presumably any humans that you would have seen at that point would have been from Earth. You're not going to have humans that would have been from elsewhere, I don't think. And so the fact that he's asking the question, it's like, well, you already know the answer to that question, but you're just sort of letting your excitement slip out a little bit. It's kind of the way I interpreted it. He also has no ghost for this whole cutscene. So that kind of continues the theory that he maybe is not a Guardian.
Yes. And also just the way that everything seems to revolve around him generally, with his unfamiliarity with this stuff. Guardians are a very strange bunch, but the one thing they almost universally seem to be able to do is pick up, and just the moment they see another of their kind, for one, they recognize them, and for two, this isn't always a thing, but they tend to be very straight to the point, you know? Like, they've experienced many lives and deaths by that point. They're able to break the universe with their laws. There isn't a lot that phases Guardians. Lodi does feel like a fish out of water in a lot of these contexts. He's asking a lot of questions. More crucially, he doesn't know what Earth is. And even though he might not, if he'd never been to Earth and was rezzed far away from it, a ghost would definitely know about Earth, and they would have informed him about it. You know.
Wait, hold on. Can we go back? Does he not know what Earth is? Is that... I interpreted it as him saying, are we from Earth?
I should rephrase that. My apologies. That's, no, it's definitely one of those moments where he does know about Earth, but he doesn't know about the context surrounding it, you know? Doesn't know about Earth's vanguard, for example, which a ghost would potentially know about. Because even if they immediately went searching for their guardian, they would have seen the way that the city developed. They would have seen the vanguard's rise. Sorry, totally needed to rephrase that. But yes, this is what I mean. Like, he's divorced from all of the context of which guardians exist. So now we're seeing that without that context, it's very unlikely that there's a ghost behind the lines of this guy's eyes. You know, like,
yeah, I suspect that if he was a guardian, that would make for a less interesting story here. And the fact that he is a sort of weird in-betweeny, we don't know what, is ripe for the sort of storytelling potential.
Shall we see what's inside this weird train?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sentient life.
Oh god, the effect is so trippy. I love it.
Yeah, it's me admiring the effect for a moment, and then I cut there, but I step into it, and there's a little animation when you get into the train. It's worth also listening. You can actually hear some music at one point.
Oh, it says the green line on the top of the train there too. So yeah, this is
indeed.
This is totally an L train. Not to mention the caution signs are in English, so yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's so trippy too, because it looks like you're traveling through the stars on the train. This is big Magic School Bus vibes.
Yeah, so the train more or less is an entrance and exit point between areas of the map. Think of it like a portal of sorts, except maybe rather than a taken portal taking you to the Ascendant Plane, this is maybe taking us to whatever the 9-y singularity in-betweeny place is.
Transferring us across Kepler, perhaps using time and space, kind of like a singularity, kind of like we mentioned a couple of hours ago.
Yep, exactly. And when we pop out the other side here, this is a pretty big deal. So let's take a look.
Because there's actual structure and civilization here too, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Fully formed. We saw some of this in the reveal, I think, but like actually getting to go here and seeing what's going on, needless to say, going to be very important.
Yeah, so obviously my instinct getting into a new area was to try and scale the walls immediately.
I didn't want to say it earlier, but I could see you sitting there and resisting the temptation to oob at one point.
Oh, I didn't resist it. I just cut it. It's just, I've tactically done that. Yeah, so for context here, you get into the area, Lodi is waiting for you, you interact with Lodi, but I was not allowed to show that interaction. It was not a particularly long interaction, so you haven't sort of missed much between then and now. But then this is what happens immediately afterwards. So this is essentially the closing moment of the mission, and I'm now just in free roam, and this is a whole area of Kepler. And
there are people.
Yeah. There are many people. So how much, Bife, do you want me to say about the many people that are there? Because I can say some things which is not in the clip, but I also want to be respectful of your spoiler policy, etc.
Well, I guess we'll give a secondary spoiler warning for those of you who don't want to hear any more of these details. If you don't, this is your opportunity to skip out now. This is very close to the end of the video, so you've seen the majority of the content, but just in case you want to preserve the rest of the mysteries beyond Mission 1, definitely go ahead and cut here. But with that being said, yeah, go ahead, and now that everyone has had the chance with a new spoiler disclaimer, what do you know about these people?
Yeah, so these are the Aeonians. And so the Aeon terminal that we saw in Chestney is their terminal. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so this is the people that were trying to send messages to us, right?
Yep. And
ooh, very interesting.
They are nearly all interactable, so you can have little conversations with them.
Wait, what? Okay.
Yep. You can go up to an Aeonian, and the Aeonian will be like, will ask you a question about Earth or something, and it's just a little 2-line pop-up situation. I'm not able to show gameplay of that right now, but the Aeonians are a thing, and they are a thing that you can interact with, which is going to be very exciting for you, because there's going to be a ton of lore potential for all that sort of stuff.
Man, that's great. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really jazzed with the idea of that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. Just so there's
yeah. I imagine that you start quests from some of that too. If it's a fully fleshed out UI bit with text, that sounds like it's gonna be a thing.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all if there's like a side quest that you can get that isn't marked, but you talk to one of the characters and then it kind of gives you it as a surprise. Like they mentioned that they've lost their pet cat or whatever, and you go find it or whatever. Who knows, right? Wouldn't shock me at all, seeing as they are trying to play with genre a bit in The Edge of Fate, and they're trying to experiment with what some new game design approaches could be towards the campaign overall. I also want to talk a little bit about the space that we are in. The right-hand side up the stairs here, there's a massive machine, this absolutely enormous machine that almost looks like a particle accelerator. If you've ever sort of seen the cross-section of CERN, it's sort of got a little bit of that vibe to it. And then also the wider space here has this massive gold ball thing, and I don't have any idea what either of those things are, because basically from this point on, you can see the sort of gold ball structure there. From this point on, in the story, I muted my dialogue audio, and I removed my subtitles. So I've played a little bit of mission stuff beyond this, but I don't know what the hell was going on in the story of any of that stuff, because I purposefully got rid of it on my screen because I knew I wasn't allowed to capture that information. So as a general heads up for spoilers overall, heading forward in the next month or 6 weeks or so, from this event specifically, people have played another mission or two, but they have not internalized story stuff from that, so you shouldn't be seeing any story really beyond this specific point that we're at right now. And like I said, we're also not allowed to show lore things in general from after this point, in terms of dialogue pop-ups and things like that. There's one or two things that is maybe worth mentioning on other activities entirely, in other activities that they've added. So, for example, there's lost sectors, which now have new lore iPads, for lack of a better word, that you can find and read messages from. So I found a couple of those. I've only been greenlit to show one of them so far, but if I am greenlit to show more, then I'll let you know. But there's lore snippets all over the place, which is definitely going to be something worth paying some attention to over the next several weeks. But yeah, shouldn't be any big core story spoilers outside of what you've already seen in this first mission today.
Which, can I just say, again, thank you so much for taking the time to run through all of this. This is an amazing peek behind the curtain that we just got, and I know that we've just yapped for basically 2.5 hours about all this, but I don't regret a moment of this. This was such a cool opportunity to be able to do this. So everybody who's watching this, go ahead and give Milo a sub on YouTube. Go ahead and follow his channel. He's got 9 videos worth of content from his Edge of Fate preview stuff already out. More will be coming. Go ahead and check out his stuff on the channel, and thank you so much. We'll also have a video that we're going to probably be doing at some point soon, where we are going to be talking about an interview that he did with Alison Lurs, and getting some more context on that, and that will be on his channel, so go ahead and check that out. But again, Milo, thank you so much. This has been an amazing look behind the curtains, and I'm so glad that we were able to do this. Yeah,
no worries. And I'd say the final thing for me would be, in the comments section, folks, if this has been something you've enjoyed, be great to hear. Bife and I have known each other for like a decade, and we've sort of talked for a very long time about maybe one day we'll do a video together. Who knows?
It's finally happening. You know,
it's finally happening. Yeah, we're finally doing it. So if there's more stuff like this that you'd like to see at some point, then let us know. And thank you for having me on the channel as a guest as well. I appreciate it.
Very, very welcome. Thanks again to Milo. I know I've said it a bunch throughout this video, but it still stands. Go and check out his channel, and check out the link down below in the description to find the piece of content that we were talking about during this video. You will find it on his channel. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Tell me what you're most excited about, and what your biggest mystery that you want to see somewhat unraveled from Edge of Fate really is. For me, it's all the stuff about the 9, but who knows, there might be other stuff that you guys are interested in. That being said, know that your viewership, as always, has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.